One afternoon, that is all it took. A polished hall, a set of dice, an uncle with steady fingers, and a kingdom began to burn from the inside, so quietly at first that the lamps still smelled of jasmine and ghee. But fires like that do not begin in the hall. They begin far away, where the wind is dry, the roads are hard, and a man learns to smile while remembering everything. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing in a long corridor of Hastinapura. Torchlight trembles on carved pillars. Oil burns low in bronze bowls. The stone under your feet still holds the day's heat, though night has begun to gather in the courtyards. Somewhere deeper in the palace, a conch has already sounded for the evening rites. Somewhere farther still, a servant hurries past with folded silk, head bowed, trying very hard to become invisible. Good instinct. In this palace, being noticed is not always a blessing. The air is layered, first sandalwood, then lamp smoke, then the faint sweetness of rose oil brushed into royal hair. Under it all, another scent travels from the outer compounds and the stables beyond. Horse, leather, warm dust, old hay. If you stand still long enough, you catch something else drifting in through the night from the caravan quarter. Cedar smoke, dry wool, and the small bronze music of camel bells from the northwest. That is Gandhara announcing itself from a long way off. You turn toward the sound. At the far end of the corridor, just beyond a pool of lamplight, a man stands beside a lattice window, still as a waiting thought. His robes are rich but never loud. His shoulders are easy, too easy. Rings gleam softly when he lifts one hand. His face holds that dangerous sort of courtesy that never wrinkles, never spills, never quite tells you whether the warmth in it is real. This is Shakuni. Not rushing, never rushing. You can already tell he is the kind of man who notices who came late to court, who looked away first, who lied badly, and who lied well. In a palace full of warriors, he carries no giant bow, no mace thick as a tree trunk, no heroic vow vibrating around him like thunder. He brings other weapons, patience, memory, timing, and fingers made for dice. If you had met the Pandavas first, you might expect an enemy to arrive with a roar. But Shakuni enters like a draft under a door, quiet, cold, suddenly everywhere. In the great hall, men will one day watch him cast the cubes again and again across polished wood. They will hear the light, dry click of ivory striking board. Such a small sound, hardly worth fearing. Yet each throw will take something living from the room. Wealth first, then pride, then freedom, then the last scraps of decency people were pretending to keep. Ancient palaces are wonderful that way. Glitter on top, disaster in the storage jars. You begin to walk. The corridor opens into a balcony court. Below, moonlight lies silver on the paving stones. Guards lean on spears. A fountain murmurs into a dark basin where lotus leaves float without hurry. From an upper chamber comes the soft rhythm of women talking behind veils and curtains. From another, the low chant of brahmanas finishing the night prayers. Temple bells drift over the city walls, thin and clear in the warm dark. And still, that far caravan music comes and goes. Gandhara. You can almost feel it before you see it. The air turning leaner, hills tightening around the roads, the smell of cedar and pack animals, traders wrapped against evening chill, stone courts instead of river mist, a land that learns caution because richer kingdoms keep looking its way. That is where Shakuni was shaped. Not here in the swollen power of the Kuru court, with its white parasols and polished etiquette and enough cousins to make any family dinner feel like a military formation. No, he comes from farther west, where speech is sharper, hospitality is careful, and every alliance has a price tied to its ankle. He was born a prince there, son of King Subala, brother to Gandhari. Remember her name. It moves beside his like a shadow beside a lamp. You are not in the dice hall yet, not fully. The game is waiting ahead, humming softly in the dark like a plucked string that has not stopped vibrating. But before the first wager, before the assembly shuddered under shame, there was a sister sent east as a bride for a blind prince. Even here in the corridor, you can feel how that news would have landed, like cool metal in the mouth, like silk that suddenly feels rough, like hearing musicians continue to play after everyone in the room has understood the insult. In the distance, a pair of young princes rushes through a side court with wooden practice swords, chased by a tutor who has already given up on dignity. One boy is laughing, another is furious about losing. Somewhere nearby, Bhima is probably asking for a fourth supper, possibly a fifth. If you give that man a plate, he treats it like a personal challenge from the universe. But in another wing, where the lamps are lower and the voice is careful, older games are already beginning. A blind heir, a princess from Gandhara, a marriage wrapped in honor and tied with discomfort, courtiers saying all the proper things, servants carrying gold trays, perfume in the air, bitterness underneath. You move again, following Shakuni through the sleeping palace. He knows these corridors now, which boards creak, which ministers drink too much, which guards gossip, which prince can be soothed with praise, and which one must be fed resentment in slow spoonfuls. He knows where Dhritarashtra sits in darkness listening. He knows where Gandhari folds her silence around herself like another garment. He knows where young Duryodhana burns whenever the sons of Pandu are praised. And he waits there, beside that fire. An uncle can be a gentle thing, a hand on the shoulder, a sweet tucked into the palm, a story after sunset. This uncle brings stories too. Only his stories are sharpened. Tonight, you will walk backward with him, away from the famous hall and into the older cold, into Gandhara's dry winds, into a brother's watchfulness, into the long road that brought his sister east beneath royal banners, into whispers of a prison and hunger and a promise remembered so fiercely it outlived comfort, mercy, and sleep. Then you will return with him, back to Hastinapura, back to the jeweled hall, back to the board laid ready, back to the moment when the dice begin to fall, and every elder in the room discovers that silence can be louder than thunder. The night is warm, the torches lean and hiss, camel bells ring faintly from beyond the walls. And at the end of the corridor, Shakuni smiles as if he has all the time in the world. For a while, he does. The smell changes before the land does. Cedar smoke thins. The air grows sharper, drier. Horses breathe in pale bursts at dawn, and the wind coming off the passes carries dust so fine it settles on your tongue. Before the dice ever touch polished wood, you have to follow him home. Back to Gandhara, to the long roads, to the sister he cannot stop protecting. This is not the fat green heartland of the Ganga, where rivers wander wide and kingdoms spread like carpets. Gandhara is harder than that. Stone-backed hills, narrow valleys, thorn trees clinging to slopes that look as if they have argued with the sky and nearly won. Winter sunlight here is thin and bright, like metal. Summer comes hot and dry, and the wind can sand the softness of a person if they stand still too long. You feel it at once. Your sandals pick up grit. Your lips want water. Your eyes narrow against the glare on pale rock. Caravans move through this country like patient insects. Camels groan, mules stamp, bells knock softly under woolen neck straps. Traders from far places come wrapped in scents that do not belong to one another. Horse sweat, cardamom, leather, mountain resin, sesame oil, foreign perfume with a sharp, sweet edge. Nothing arrives in Gandhara by accident. Everything has crossed something to get here. A prince born in such a place learns early that roads are not just roads. They are promises, threats, opportunities, excuses. A caravan delayed by snow might mean hunger in one district and profit in another. A messenger arriving at dusk can change the mood of a whole court before the lamps are lit, and a smile can be safer than a sword. That is the first thing about Shakuni. He grows up in a land where stronger powers breathe over the border like sleeping animals. You can almost feel them. Great kingdoms to the east, tribes in the hills, ambitious men who look at Gandhara and see a pass to control, a trade route to tax, a useful marriage to arrange. So boys here are taught many things. How to ride over bad ground, how to keep balance on a slope where the stones slide under hoof, how to judge distance by mountain light, how to hear insult hidden inside praise, how to praise someone in a way that leaves them slightly uncertain whether they were praised at all. Useful skills, very royal, very exhausting. In King Subala's court, words are weapons polished daily, not always deadly, often worse. The hall itself is handsome in a severe way. Dark timber beams, stone floors cool in morning shade, bronze lamps, wool hangings heavy enough to keep out some winter bite, though never all of it. You smell old smoke in the rafters, wool warmed by human bodies, oil on spear shafts, a faint sweetness from crushed dates set out for guests. This is a court that counts horses, counts silver, counts cousins, counts who laughed too quickly at whose joke. You stand there in your mind and watch the princes come and go. Not soft boys, lean boys. Their wrists are corded from bow practice. Their boots are dusty. Their tutors are not interested in making them charming unless charm can be used in negotiation. Meals are hearty without being luxurious. If a young prince wants a second helping, he had better reach before an older brother does. And there are brothers. So many movements within a royal household. So many little storms. Shakuni grows among them, quick-eyed and dry-mouthed, with amusement. He is not the kind who crashes through a room and makes furniture fear for its life. That is another sort of prince. Gandhara has those too, no doubt. But Shakuni watches first. He notices which minister taps his thumb when lying, which envoy speaks too smoothly, which guard brightens when hearing a certain noble family's name, which servant has been crying but washed her face well enough to think no one saw. He is young, yes, but is already listening with his whole skin. You can imagine him in the back of a council chamber, not yet old enough to command attention, which is sometimes the best possible age. Nobody fears the quiet prince in the shadow of a pillar. So everybody speaks in front of him. One old advisor drones through border accounts, another objects. A visiting chief laughs too loudly at the mention of tribute. King Subala asks a mild question that is not mild at all. And there, just beyond the strongest pool of lamplight, sits Shakuni, apparently idle. Apparently. His fingers play with carved nuts or knuckle bones or a strip of leather. His head tilts. His eyes move once. He stores everything. In Gandhara, memory is a treasury. It has to be. A kingdom perched among roots survives by remembering who passed through, who paid, who cheated, who promised troops and sent only condolences. Forgetfulness is expensive. Trust is more expensive. By the time Shakuni is old enough to stand beside his father rather than behind him, he has already learned that treaties are rarely read the way they are written. The words are one thing, the faces are the truth. A messenger may swear friendship while his jaw sits hard as kiln-baked clay. A bride price may arrive glittering like sunlight on water and still carry insult folded into every silken layer. A man may call another brother and mean future inconvenience. This is the climate in which Shakuni's mind ripens. Dry wind outside, dry wit inside. He learns to answer offense with elegance, to delay without refusing, to flatter without kneeling too low, to lose a small argument in order to win the room 3 days later. You can almost hear the court laughing at one of his early remarks. Not a huge laugh. Gandhara is too restrained for that in council. A dangerous little laugh, the kind that makes one minister look down and another narrow his eyes because the boy has said something true and wrapped it in silk. King Subala sees it. Of course he does. Fathers in royal houses notice talent the way traders notice weight in the hand. Some are pleased, some are alarmed, usually both. Subala is a man shaped by borders. He knows his sons must be more than brave. Brave is common. Brave gets buried with honors. Useful sons live longer. So Shakuni is trained not only in arms, but in proportion. How much to reveal, how much to conceal, when to offend, and when to seem charmed, when silence in a negotiation is stronger than 10 declarations. And he learns from the roads too. That matters, because Gandhara is a kingdom of arrivals. You can spend a morning in its markets and hear 6 accents before breakfast fully settles. Persian wool, Bactrian camels, fine metalwork from far cities, spices carried in tied leather packets, turquoise, lapis, little carved boxes that smell faintly of cedar and musk when opened. The market is not gentle. It haggles, it shouts, it lies with a straight face and then laughs if you catch it. Boys raised near such trade do not grow innocent for long. You walk there beside him now. The sun is still climbing, thin gold on stone. A butcher is chopping goat with brisk efficiency. Flatbread puffs on a clay wall oven. Someone is roasting gram. Someone else is cheating on saffron measurements. A camel complains to the whole world like an old magistrate denied his chair. Shakuni moves through it easily, not with the solemn strut of a prince demanding recognition. Worse, with curiosity, he asks questions no one expects, touches the weave of imported cloth, lifts a carved game board, watches hands change coins, watches eyes change prices. He sees how men gamble before they ever touch dice. Every purchase is a wager, every alliance a bigger one. And perhaps that is where it begins, at least in part. Not in a dark curse, not yet, but in ordinary seeing, in understanding that people reveal themselves most honestly when they want something and think no one has noticed. In markets, in councils, in family meals, especially family meals, because for all the hard edges of Gandhara, there is warmth in Subala's house too. Not softness, never that, but warmth, copper dishes steaming in winter, thick blankets at night, jars of clarified butter set near the kitchen fire, sisters and brothers interrupting one another, the smell of cumin and onion and barley stew, a servant trying to keep order among royal children and failing with heroic consistency. And among all these relationships, one shines clear. Gandhari, his sister. If Shakuni learned suspicion from the court, he learned tenderness from her. Not sentimental tenderness. Not weak. Gandhara would laugh that out of a person by noon. But the real thing, the kind that appears in habits, saving the sweeter fruit for her because she likes it. Standing half a step nearer when strangers visit, remembering which stories make her laugh and which ones make her go quiet, noticing when she is tired before she admits it. You see them as children first. She is bright-eyed, composed sooner than her years should require, already carrying that strange royal training girls receive before they can possibly want it. Sit straight, speak carefully, remember names, smile, but not foolishly. Learn songs, learn lineages. Learn that one day your life may be packed into bridal carts and sent over a horizon chosen by other people. A pleasant curriculum, very restful. Shakuni hates parts of it immediately, not because he can stop it, he cannot, but because he can see it coming. Gandhari is not a shadow in the household. She is loved. She is intelligent. She listens with unusual steadiness. Servants trust her. Younger siblings drift toward her. Even elders soften around her when they are not trying to turn her into a future alliance. Sometimes she walks the terraces at dusk, and Shakuni goes with her. The air is colder then. You can smell dust cooling, lamp oil being lit below, distant cook fires beginning their evening work. Above them, the sky opens enormous and clear, stars arriving one by one over the black backs of hills. They talk in the easy way siblings do when the world has not yet put them in separate cages. Not always about great things. A rude ambassador, a falcon that stole meat from a tray, a tutor who mistook his own boredom for wisdom, one of their brothers trying to sound profound and instead sounding constipated. Gandhari laughs. Shakuni, hearing it, becomes briefly simple. That may be the truest thing about him in these early years. Around others, he is alert. Around courtiers, strategic. Around visiting nobles, politely armored. Around Gandhari, he relaxes. You can feel the difference. His shoulders lower. His sarcasm turns playful rather than sharp. He speaks faster. He lets irritation show and then lets it go. The dry land has made him watchful. She makes him human. There are lessons in the women's quarters he cannot attend, but he hears of them. Gandhari learning ritual observances. Gandhari learning governance in the indirect royal way women often do, through household management, through kinship, through listening from behind screens, and understanding which marriage can calm a border and which one can start a feud. Sometimes she asks him what happened in council. He tells her, not the official version, the real one. Which noble arrived with perfume, too strong, hoping to hide nerves? Which envoy praised Gandhara's horses before asking about taxes? Which elder claimed caution while reaching for advantage with both hands? She understands quickly, often too quickly for comfort. A good sister for a dangerous brother, a dangerous sister for anyone who mistakes gentleness for emptiness. And because they are siblings, they quarrel too. Of course they do. He can be smug. She can be relentless. He says something clever. She says something truer. He groans as if personally betrayed by accuracy. She gives him that look sisters have perfected since the beginning of human time. The one that says, yes, you are very witty, and no, that will not save you here. You are standing in a corridor one afternoon when it happens. Sunlight falls through a high lattice in narrow bands. Dust drifts in those gold slants like sleepy little spirits. Somewhere nearby, someone is grinding grain. You hear the stone turn, steady and rough. Shakuni has just come from a lesson in statecraft and carries himself like a boy who would like applause for surviving it. Gandhari asks what he learned. He offers a polished answer, all principles and timing and measured responses. She listens, then tells him that if he really wants to understand politics, he should spend a day in the kitchen when supplies run short. That lands. He stares. She smiles. And there it is again, that small wound she gives his pride and the affection tied up inside it. She sees through him. Worse, she enjoys it. He never stops loving her for that. Years pass this way, not peacefully exactly. Kingdoms do not become peaceful merely because children are growing nicely. There are always disputes, envoys, rumors from east and west, men on horseback carrying too much importance in too little sleep. But Gandhara endures. Its roads stay busy. Its winters stay lean. Its court stays sharp. And Shakuni keeps learning. He learns that gifts are seldom gifts. He learns that kings with broad, fertile lands tend to speak slowly, as if the world will wait. Men from frontier lands do not have that luxury. They answer quickly because hesitation can become surrender before sunset. He learns that if you cannot overpower, you must outlast. If you cannot outlast, outthink. If you cannot outthink, then at least never arrive unprepared. There is one winter in particular. You remember it because the cold seems to ring in the air itself. Water in shallow basins films over before dawn. Servants wrap their hands in wool while carrying bronze pitchers. The palace floors are like stored moonlight under bare feet. Shakuni is older now, no longer merely listening in corners. Subala brings him into smaller councils, not the grand ceremonial audiences, the real ones. Maps unrolled on low tables, pebbles marking routes, accounts of grain, news of a neighboring ruler testing boundaries with smiles and small violations, a convoy taxed twice, a border marker moved by night. An engagement proposed just when troop movement becomes inconvenient. This is Gandhara's weather too, political weather, dry, cutting, full of hidden stones. Subala speaks with his sons, but his eyes linger on Shakuni more often now. There is a reason. Some men are made for charge and clash, some for managing storehouses, some for ritual. Shakuni is made for the invisible part. He can hear danger before it announces itself. He can also enjoy the game a little too much. That tendency is present early, like a spice not yet dominant in the dish, but already unmistakable. When a difficult envoy is outmaneuvered, Shakuni's satisfaction is immediate, not loud. He is too well trained for gloating, but it flickers at the corner of the mouth. When two rivals both leave believing they have won, and Gandhara has quietly lost nothing, he is delighted. When a pompous visitor walks into a verbal trap built of his own vanity, Shakuni nearly glows. He likes minds, he likes contests, he likes pressure and the fine edge of timing. You can see why older men both admire and worry over him. because the cleverest boy in a royal family is a blessing right up until he becomes something more difficult. Still, in these years, he is held by whom? By his father's authority, by the habits of Gandhara, by Gandhari's presence. Do not miss that last one. A sister can be an anchor without ever saying so. There are evenings when the court has been especially sour. Some caravan dispute, some tribute insult, some visiting dignitary who behaved as if he had personally invented arrogance. Shakuni returns restless, carrying conversation like static in his limbs. Gandhari finds him, perhaps in a courtyard where a winter fire burns low in a bronze basin, perhaps under an awning while rain finally taps the stone in a rare blessing, perhaps in a library corner where scrolls smell of dust and old bark and oil. She does not flatter him. That would have been useless. She settles him by refusing to be impressed by the parts of him that most impress others. If he boasts, she trims it. If he broods, she loosens it. If he is wounded, she notices before he says so. You feel the hush in those moments, the kind between siblings who have known each other too long to perform. Outside, maybe the wind moves through cedar. Maybe somewhere a watchman calls the hour. Maybe a horse stamps in the stable, impatient with weather and humanity alike. Inside, lamplight turns brass warm and stone gentle. And Shakuni, future breaker of a kingdom, is still just a brother listening while his sister tells him not to become ridiculous. A valuable service, perhaps the last one, powerful enough to restrain him. He goes riding with her too, when custom and safety allow. Gandhara's roads do not always welcome litters and embroidered delicacy. Sometimes the better way is horseback, wool wrapped tight, servants trailing, guards alert. The hills smell of sage crushed under hooves. The wind pulls at veils. Eagles circle where the air rises warm off dark rock. You are there with them now. The trail is narrow. The drop beside it is rude. The sky is a hard blue dome. Shakuni rides slightly to the outer side without seeming to make a point of it. Protection done elegantly often looks like coincidence. Gandhari notices anyway. She always notices. He points out ridge lines, old shrines, a trade path curling toward distant settlements. She asks about the people who pass through, and he tells her. Mountain tribes, merchants, soldiers carrying one king's insignia this season and another's next season, because loyalty can be very portable when payroll is involved. She listens and stores it. They are both learning the same world from different doors. And beneath it all sits the knowledge no one says aloud too often. Royal daughters do not remain where they are born. That truth hangs over a palace from the day a princess first learns posture. Every gift she receives may someday travel with her. Every skill taught to her belongs partly to another household, waiting in the future. Every fond family meal carries somewhere deep beneath laughter the taste of eventual parting. Shakuni knows this. He hates it in the abstract first. Later, he will hate it personally. There are suitors spoken of in those years, of course. Names drift through the palace like weather reports. This king's son, that allied branch, a ruler with cavalry, a prince with lineage and ambition and inconvenient geography. Gandhari receives these reports with dignity. What else can she do? Shakuni receives them as if each one were a tax levied on his patience. He asks questions, too many questions. What is this man's temper? How does his mother behave? What happened to his last alliance? How often does he break hunting laws? What do his servants say when drunk? A very normal brother, completely calm. Subala sometimes rebukes him with amusement, sometimes with real irritation. One cannot investigate every possible bridegroom as if preparing for war. Shakuni clearly disagrees. And yet, beneath the sharpness, there is helplessness too. He is a prince, not fate. He can advise, he can observe, he can resent. He cannot hold the world still. That inability settles in him like a hidden splinter. Useful to remember, because men who later seem made of pure calculation often begin with one old wound, the discovery that being clever does not mean being able to save the people you love. For now, though, the days still move under Gandhara's wide sky. Markets open, councils gather, dust rises from the roads, snow crowns distant heights, then shrinks. Goat bells tinkle somewhere beyond the walls. Children become adults, while everyone pretends not to be startled by it. Shakuni learns games too. Board games, counting games, games of chance, games of memory. Nothing sinister in that yet. Courts are full of games. Men like to conquer little wooden worlds when they cannot yet conquer larger ones. A prince who can calculate odds, read risk, and keep his face still while fortune turns is admired. Shakuni is very good at this, annoyingly good. The sort of good that makes older cousins insist on one more round and then regret their confidence almost immediately. He does not merely know rules, he knows people. He senses impatience. He senses greed. He senses the tiny leaning forward that means a man is about to overcommit. You sit near the board and watch. The pieces click softly. Oil lamps tremble in a draught. Someone munches roasted chickpeas too loudly. A cousin laughs before he should. Shakuni glances up once, and the game is already his. When he wins, Gandhari is not impressed for long. She tells him that victory over fools is nothing to boast about. He asks whether she would prefer he lost. She says she would prefer he developed character. Brutal, entirely unfair, completely sibling. He laughs anyway. That laugh matters. Before later years harden it into something thinner. It is real here. Low, quick, amused, alive. The dry wind of Gandhara made him sharp. Its roads made him observant. Its court made him dangerous. But his sister made him warm enough, for a while, to remain recognizable to himself. And that is the version of Shakuni you need to keep beside you now. Not the man in the Kuru hall with dice in his hand. Not yet. Keep the younger one. The prince on a terrace under cold stars. The rider on a narrow mountain path. The son in King Subala's severe bright court. The brother who saves the sweeter fruit. The boy who learns that faces speak before mouths do. The young man who can already untie a knot in a negotiation and tie 3 more in a rival's confidence. The wind moves over Gandhara all evening. It slips through cedar and over stone. It rattles shutters. It carries the smell of cook fires and wool and distant frost. In the palace, lamps are lit one by one. Gold points in darkening rooms. Servants pass with bronze trays. A musician tests a string and tightens it. A door closes softly. And in one chamber, brother and sister sit a little longer than they need to, talking while night gathers over the hills. Neither of them knows how far that night will travel. Neither of them knows that a road from Gandhara to Hastinapura is already waiting in the dark. For now, there is only the homeland, only the thin, bright air, only the hard roads, only the court where wit is armor, only the family still under one roof, and Shakuni, listening to the wind, learning patience, learning memory, learning how a man survives in a world where stronger kingdoms smile first and reach second. The dice are still far away. but the hand that will throw them is already forming in the dry northern light. Then the summons comes from Hastinapura, wrapped in silk and courtesy, which is often how trouble prefers to travel. You hear the messengers before you see them, harness bells, hooves on packed earth, that polished, practiced bustle that always arrives with royal business, as if even the dust must stand up straighter. The courtyard of Gandhara fills with movement. Servants hurry. Guards adjust their belts. Someone brings out trays of water, scented with cardamom and mint. Someone else starts worrying about carpets. Royal courts can smell anxiety faster than smoke. The letter itself is beautiful. Cream-colored cloth, seal impressed in wax, thread wound around it with a care that says, "This request is an honor, and also not really a request." Shakuni watches it all from the shade of a stone colonnade. He does not rush forward. He does not smile too quickly. He has been raised among hard roads and harder neighbors. He knows that when a greater kingdom sends affection from far away, affection is rarely traveling alone. You can almost feel the dry mountain wind still clinging to his robe, though the afternoon is warm. Dust rests pale on the hem. His fingers tap once against his wrist, then stop. King Subala receives the envoys with every proper grace. Seats are brought. Perfumed oil burns in shallow lamps. Copper cups shine. The visitors speak with the smoothness of men who have made long practice of sounding generous while asking for something costly. They speak of alliance. They speak of esteem. They speak of the ancient dignity of Gandhara and the greatness of the Kuru house, of roads joined, fortunes joined, families joined. And then gently, as if setting down a gold bracelet, they place the true matter in the room. Gandhari is desired as bride for Dhritarashtra of Hastinapura. For a beat, everything stays very still. You can feel it in your own body, that strange pause after a blow lands and before the pain announces itself properly. The lamps flicker. A fly circles the lip of a fruit bowl. Somewhere in the courtyard, a camel complains to the sky in a voice like old wood bending. Dhritarashtra, blind, not rumor, not exaggeration, blind from birth. The words settle into the hall like grit into milk. Subala does not flinch outwardly. Kings survive by making their faces useless to enemies. But Shakuni sees it. Of course he does. He sees the tiny hardening around his father's mouth, the way one knuckle presses white against the arm of the chair, the slight delay before the next breath. Honor, they call it. A match with the Kuru line. A place in the greatest court in the land. A daughter becoming queen, perhaps, in time. All true. And still it lands like an insult wrapped in sandalwood. Because this is how mighty houses make demands while keeping their hands clean. They send gifts first. The gifts are brought in. Gold worked thin as leaves. Fine cottons from the river plains. Brocades heavy with thread that catches the light. Necklaces cooled in boxes lined with soft wool. Perfumes in little carved flasks. A litter with ivory inlay. Horses with glossy necks. Servants carrying trays until the room seems to glitter from floor to ceiling. You smell saffron, cedar oil, leather, and the faint metallic scent of polished ornaments warmed by human hands. It is dazzling. It is suffocating. You stand there with Shakuni, and the whole display feels less like generosity than a wall being built, bright brick by bright brick. No one says what happens if Gandhara declines. No one needs to. Hastinapura is not asking as an equal asks. It is asking the way a river asks a smaller stream to join it. Subala asks for time, which is also proper. The envoys agree, which is also proper. They are lodged with full courtesy. The palace shifts into that strained quiet that follows formal speech. Everyone moves softly. Everyone listens through walls. Even the servants pouring water begin to pour it like spies. By evening, the air has cooled. Thin mountain dusk gathers along the parapets. The smell of cooking fires drifts up from the lower city. Lentils, onion, barley flatbread, smoke caught in wool. Shakuni finds his sister on an upper terrace. Gandhari is standing by the railing, looking west where the hills turn purple at sunset. Her veil is loose in the evening breeze. Gold thread along its edge brushes her cheek. She's still young, but not a child. Royal daughters are not allowed long childhoods. They learn too early how to sit straight under news they did not choose. She already knows. Of course she knows. News like this moves through a palace faster than monsoon water through a broken lane. She does not ask him if it is true. She asks how bad. That is Gandhari. No ornamental foolishness. No fainting, no dramatics, no performance for the moon, Shakuni tells her. Not all at once, piece by piece. The Kuru proposal, the honor being offered, the pressure folded beneath it, the groom's blindness. The last word comes out of him like a stone. Gandhari listens without interrupting. Below them, a watchman walks the wall with a spear and a lantern. You hear his footfalls, measured and lonely. Somewhere farther off, a temple bell rings for evening worship. The sound floats up thin and pure through the cooling air. When Shakuni finishes, he waits for anger. He would know what to do with anger. Anger can be sharpened. Anger can be fed. Anger can pace a room with you until dawn like a loyal hound. But Gandhari gives him something worse. Calm, not the calm of peace. The calm of a door closing. She asks what their father will do. He tells her the truth. Subala will weigh, calculate, delay if he can, refuse if he does, accept if he must. That is what kings do when their daughters become part of the map. Gandhari's hand closes around the stone railing. The skin across her knuckles tightens. Her bracelets make one soft sound. You are there in the last light, and you can almost feel the rough chill of the parapet beneath her fingers. She says very little. That silence tells him enough. He begins, for one dangerous moment, to speak of refusal, of insult, of roads through the mountains that can be defended, of what Gandhara has survived before. But he hears the weakness in it, even as he says it. Gandhara is clever. Gandhara is tough. Gandhara is not Hastinapura. The difference sits between brother and sister, like a third person. Night comes. In the inner chambers, the family gathers. Lamps smoke slightly in the corners. Silk rustles. The smell of warm milk, lamp ghee, and cedar chests hangs in the air. Outside, wind brushes along the shutters. Subala speaks plainly at last. This marriage will go forward. He does not pretend delight. That almost makes it worse. He speaks of safety, alliance, necessity, the standing of their house. His voice has the heavy steadiness of a man swallowing sand and calling it dinner. Shakuni's jaw clenches so hard it aches. You can feel your own teeth set with his. A prince learns many kinds of helplessness, and this may be the first that truly enters his bones. Not on a battlefield, not in a treaty hall, not from hunger, from silk, from manners, from a decision made with lowered voices and perfect etiquette, while his sister sits straight and hears her life being carried away. Gandhari bows her head and accepts. What else can she do in that room? The lamp flame throws gold across her veil. Her face is half in light, half in shadow. She looks, for one breath, already far away. Preparations begin the next morning. Palaces love preparations. They can drown grief in tasks if given enough linen and enough lists. Trunks are opened, jewels counted, wedding garments measured and remeasured, attendants chosen, priests consulted, astrologers summoned to look severe over charts as if the stars might apologize. The whole place smells of sandal paste, wool wrappings, camphor, ink, rosewater. Women move through Gandhari's rooms, carrying folded textiles in towers against their chins. Ivory combs are laid out. Gold girdles glimmer on low tables. Little jars of vermilion and turmeric sit in rows like waiting suns. It would be beautiful if it were not happening to someone. Shakuni drifts through this bright machinery like a man walking inside his own clenched fist. He checks the route. He questions the escort. He inspects horseback. He speaks to servants twice and trusts them half as much the second time. A prince about to send his sister across half a continent becomes interested in everything: the stitching of curtains, the strength of axles, the honesty of guards, the weather, the moon. If he could inspect fate itself, he would probably demand better workmanship. You move with him through corridors smelling of cedar and old wool. You hear women laughing in one room because sometimes people laugh when they are sad and do not know what else to do. You hear someone crying in another and then stopping quickly when footsteps approach. Days later, the wedding procession leaves Gandhara. Dawn is pale and cold. The road below the city lies like a grey ribbon through rock and scrub. Pack animals snort clouds into the air. Wheels creak. Leather straps groan. Priests murmur blessings. Someone scatters grains. Someone breaks a coconut. Someone forgets where the ceremonial garland was packed, and for 10 absurd minutes, the entire departure nearly halts because a garland has vanished under a saddlecloth. Even in sorrow, logistics remain undefeated. Then the caravan begins to move. Stand there for a moment and feel it. The jolt of wheels over stone. The smell of horse sweat and dust already lifting. The sting of morning wind against your face. The glint of bronze harness pieces in first light. Gandhari rides within a veiled carriage, rich enough to please any court and lonely enough to break your heart. Her attendants sit near her. Shakuni rides close, never too far from the wheels. Behind them come gifts from Gandhara. Ahead of them, the long road to the Kuru capital. The journey takes days upon days. Mountain air thins and thickens. Ridges give way to broader roads. The dry speech of Gandhara slowly meets the heavier, greener breath of the plains. At roadside halts, tents rise in disciplined rows. Cooking fires send up the smell of lentils, cumin, and smoke. Guards exchange murmured jokes under starlight. Priests chant evening verses. Camels kneel with offended dignity, as if the whole business of empires should really have been discussed with them first. Shakuni barely sleeps. Sometimes he rides ahead to inspect river crossings and resting stations. Sometimes he falls back beside the carriage and listens for movement inside. Sometimes at night he stands looking east while the fire dies low and the horses stamp softly in the dark. He is learning the shape of the anger that cannot be used yet. That is a special kind of misery. Quick anger is almost a relief. It flares, it breaks, it spends itself. This kind settles in, slow, dry, watchful, like a coal tucked under ash. Gandhari remains composed. That composure unsettles him more than tears would have. At one stop beneath tamarind trees, she asks him to walk with her a little way from the camp. The evening is warm now. Crickets pulse in the grasses. The scent of damp earth rises from a nearby watercourse. She speaks of duty, of fathers, of kingdoms, of the strange smallness of a person's wishes beside a family's need. Shakuni hears all of it and hates every word, though none of it is false. She is not trying to comfort him. She is trying to steady him. That too is very Gandhari. You walk with them through the dimming light, hearing the cloth of their garments brush against dry seed heads. A night bird calls once from a tree. Then she says something he will remember all his life. She says she does not fear darkness as much as she fears being pitied inside it. Shakuni turns to look at her sharply. Her face is almost hidden by the fading light and her veil, but her posture is unbent. She is already building a private wall inside herself, stone by stone. He wants to tell her she will not be pitied if he can help it. He wants to tell her 100 impossible things. Instead, he walks beside her in silence, while the campfires bloom one by one behind them. At last, the plains open wide. The air changes before the city appears. You smell water first, river breath, wet reeds, rich soil, then smoke from 100 kitchens, ghee warming in pots, dung fires, jasmine in courtyards, and the thick human scent of a capital where too many lives are packed together under ambition. Hastinapura rises from the plain, broad and pale under the sun. High walls, gate towers, banners lifting in the wind, chariots coming and going, merchants shouting. Conches sounding somewhere beyond the gates. It is grand. It is older than Gandhara in the way great trees are older than knives. And to Shakuni, for all its splendor, it feels immediately like a place where everyone is measuring everyone else. The reception is flawless. That is the problem with polished courts. They can turn cruelty into ceremony so smoothly that the flowers hardly notice. Bhishma receives them. Tall, even in age, white-haired, composed like a carved pillar that has somehow learned to breathe. Vidura is there too, grave-eyed, seeing too much as usual. Courtiers in layered silk stand ranked behind them. Gold flashes at wrists and ears. Perfume hangs over the entrance hall, sandalwood, lotus oil, and something sharp beneath, perhaps frankincense. You hear the rustle of silk, the distant call of peacocks in an inner garden, the faint slap of water from a courtyard pool. Words of welcome are spoken. Blessings, praise, assurances of affection between houses, all exact, all brittle. Shakuni answers with perfect courtesy. He bows where he should bow. He smiles where he should smile. He can be manner itself when needed. But inwardly, he is counting exits, doors, faces, tones of voice, places where men stand too near power and too far from honesty. Then he meets Dhritarashtra. The blind prince is broad-shouldered, strong, imposing even in stillness. He is not feeble, not soft. Blindness has not made him frail. It has made everyone around him slightly uncertain in his presence, which is its own kind of power. He turns his head toward the sound of arrival with practiced precision. Servants murmur softly. A hand touches his arm, then withdraws. Shakuni studies him. This is the man. This is the life chosen for Gandhari. Dhritarashtra speaks with dignity. His voice is deep, controlled, and marked by effort, as if he has spent years mastering every tone that might betray pain. For one strange moment, Shakuni's anger has nowhere simple to go. Because the man is not monstrous. That would have been easier. A brute can be hated cleanly, a fool too. But this man bears his darkness with a kind of discipline, and discipline complicates things. Still, complication is not comfort. The marriage rites are arranged. Days fill with ceremonies, turmeric, sacred fires, priests chanting through long strands of syllables older than all of them, rice, garlands, thread-wound and knotted, offerings crackling in flame. The palace glows in evening lamplight. Brass dishes shine. Women sing in inner chambers while grinding fragrant paste. The floors are cool beneath bare feet. Every surface seems polished enough to reflect a face. You are there when Gandhari is dressed for marriage. Attendants gather around her before dawn. Her hair is perfumed and braided. Her garments are layered, soft undercloth, heavier silk above, embroidery at the edge, ornaments at neck and waist and wrist. Henna deepens on her hands. A veil is brought, pale and fine, then another richer one for the outer rite. The room smells of rose, saffron, lamp smoke. No one speaks loudly. You hear bangles click, fabric sighs. Someone sniffles and pretends it was only dust. Shakuni comes to the threshold and stops. For a moment, he sees not a princess prepared for an alliance, but the girl who walked mountain terraces with him in evening wind, who knew the names of caravan captains, who laughed once at a courtier so pretentious he nearly swallowed his own compliment. Then the attendants step aside. Gandhari lifts her face, and in her eyes there is something changed, resolved, far, bright and terrible. She asks for a long strip of cloth. At first the attendants do not understand. Then they do. The room seems to lose air. The cloth is brought, soft, clean, white. Shakuni feels his stomach go cold. He asks her with his eyes not to do this. He may even say her name. Just that, barely louder than breath. But Gandhari has crossed somewhere he cannot follow. She takes the cloth in her own hands. You hear the faint slide of it over her bangles. You see the way it catches light, plain beside all that gold. She folds it once, then again. Her fingers are steady, too steady. Then she places it over her eyes. Not quickly, not theatrically. Slowly, cloth touches brow, cloth lowers, darkness covers sight. She draws it back around her head and knots it firm. That moment lands with more force than any shouted refusal. You can almost feel the fabric against your own skin. The sudden warmth over the eyelids, the muffling of light. The world reduced to breath, cloth, heartbeat. An attendant lets out a tiny broken sound and covers her mouth. Shakuni stands rigid. In that white band around his sister's eyes, something inside him tightens past speech. He understands her meaning without needing it explained. If her husband will live in darkness, she will enter darkness too. Whether out of devotion, protest, pride, defiance, or some braid of all four, she has chosen it, and he, watching, realizes two things at once. First, no one in this palace will ever fully own her. Second, this palace will cost her dearly anyway. The ceremony proceeds. How could it not? Royal machinery does not stop because the human heart has become unbearable. Priests chant louder, perhaps to steady themselves. Garlands are exchanged. Hands are joined. The sacred fire burns, fragrant with ghee and wood. Dhritarashtra stands opposite the woman who has blinded herself before entering his life. Maybe he is moved, maybe wounded, maybe grateful, maybe all at once. His face reveals little, but the air around him changes, charged and uneasy. You smell the smoke of the altar, hear the low rise and fall of Vedic chant. Feel the press of witnesses, the heat of lamps, the weight of jewels, the endless dignity expected of everyone present. Shakuni remains near enough to see the knot in Gandhari's blindfold had been tied carefully, so it will not slip. That detail nearly undoes him, not the grand gesture, the practicality. She means to live in it. After the rites, the palace shifts into celebration. Music, feasting, courtiers praising the union, servants gliding with trays of sweets, spiced rice, curds, fried breads glossed with honey. The smell is rich enough to make you drowsy. Cardamom, roasted grain, clarified butter, incense and flowers, beginning to tire in the heat. But beneath it all, Shakuni catches something else. The cold smell of wet stone in interior corridors, oil on old wood, a faint medicinal bitterness from rooms where compromises have been nursed for generations, a palace that already knows how to swallow what is inconvenient and keep smiling. He walks those corridors later, alone. Torchlight throws long bars across the floor. Painted walls glimmer. Somewhere a servant coughs behind a screen. Somewhere someone laughs too loudly at a noble's joke. Somewhere a woman prays in a voice so low it is almost just breathing. You walk with him, cool stone underfoot, night air slipping through carved windows, the smell of extinguished lamps and fading jasmine. This place is powerful. This place is disciplined. This place is full of excellent manners and unshed resentments. He understands at once that Gandhari has not been married into peace. She has been placed inside a knot. And knots, once tightened, rarely loosen by themselves. Morning finds him in a courtyard where pigeons peck grain between paving stones. The sun is soft still. A fountain splashes. The city beyond the walls is already awake. Gandhari comes to him, attended lightly, moving carefully but without hesitation. The blindfold is there, white against her dark hair, clean and firm. She has already begun learning the palace by touch and sound. The brush of a doorway, the turn of a hall, the count of steps, the shape of silence around people who want something. Shakuni wants to beg her to come home. He does not. A prince may dream nonsense, but he cannot speak it into daylight. Instead, he tells her he will remain for a time. That is all. A simple promise, an ordinary sentence. But you can hear what lies under it. He will not leave her alone among these polished strangers. He will learn this court. He will remember every slight, every softness, every weakness. He will make himself useful, which in palaces is often a more dangerous choice than making oneself loved. Gandhari reaches for his hand and finds it on the first try. Her grip is calm. The fountain keeps sounding. A peacock cries from some rooftop. Sun warms the stone inch by inch. Brother and sister stand there in the heart of Hastinapura, and between them passes a vow not spoken before priests, not written on any scroll, not adorned with flowers. Only this: he has seen where she has been sent. He will not forget. And the palace, all around them, breathes in sandalwood, river mist, silk, and compromise. A place of wide halls and narrow mercies. A place where even love must learn to wear armor. Soon enough, everyone will know Shakuni, not as the prince who arrived with the bride, but as the uncle who stayed. For now, though, stay here, in the courtyard's early hush, in the splashing water, in the smell of jasmine giving way to day, in the white cloth over Gandhari's eyes, in Shakuni's stillness beside her, so complete it feels almost like prayer. The marriage fires have cooled. The gifts have been unpacked. The music has faded. The horses in the guest stables stamp and settle. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, the broad plain of the Kurus lies under rising sun, innocent for one more morning. But inside these halls, something has already changed. Not loudly, not yet. Only a brother's heart learning the architecture of injury. Only a sister choosing darkness with her own hands. only the first quiet thread being drawn tight. And somewhere beneath the wedding songs and royal courtesies, another story keeps breathing in the dark. A story of locked doors, thin rations, and memory sharpened into a blade. It does not arrive with trumpets. No herald announces it. It lives in corners, in the pause before an old servant speaks, in the way some names are lowered rather than said. It moves like a draft under a door. In Gandhara, men told it by winter fires. In Hastinapura, women whispered it while grinding sandalwood for the queen. People whispered different versions in winter courtyards and palace passages, but Shakuni carried it as if it were true enough to wake to. You can feel the air change when this tale enters. The warmth leaves it. The stone grows colder. Even the lamp seems to burn more carefully. They say the Gandharan king, Subala, and his sons did not leave Hastinapura after the marriage. They say the smiles ended. They say doors closed. It begins, in this telling, not with shouting. That would have been easier. No, it begins with politeness, always a dangerous sign in a royal house. A messenger comes. A room is offered. Guards are posted in a way that pretends not to be guarding. Meals arrive late. Questions go unanswered. Then one morning, the iron bolt slides into place from the outside, and everyone inside hears it. A plain sound, almost small. But there are sounds that divide a life into before and after. That was one of them. The chamber is not enormous, not a dungeon of dramatic chains and theatrical misery. This is worse. It is practical. Stone floor, stone walls, one high slit where a little light enters by day, a smell of damp mortar, old straw, cold iron. The place has the patience of a well. The princes of Gandhara stand there in their wool and linen and disbelief. King Subala does not waste time pounding the door. He is too experienced for that. He listens. That is what men do when they realize force will not open what force has closed. He listens to the guards outside shifting their weight, to a distant cough in the corridor, to footsteps that pass and do not stop. Then he turns to his sons. No one says the obvious thing at first. That too would make it real. A while later, food comes. You expect trays, bread, lentils, a jug of water, something that at least tries to imitate royal imprisonment. What arrives is a single measure of grain, not enough for a household, barely enough for one man. The bowl sits in the threshold for a moment before being nudged inside with a sandal. Then the bolt falls again. The brothers look at one another. This is the kind of joke cruel men enjoy, a ration so small it insults hope. One of the younger princes laughs once, sharply, because there are moments when laughter is the only thing stopping fear from rushing into the mouth. Another tells him to shut up. The laugh dies, just like that. Subala kneels by the bowl. He does not touch it immediately. He counts. Not the grain, the sons. Shakuni is among them, not the oldest, not the youngest. Keen-eyed, dry-mouthed already. He has spent his life reading gestures in assembly halls, and now he is reading something worse. The pace at which hunger intends to enter the room. The first day they divide it. That is what families do before the world teaches them arithmetic with sharper tools. A little for the father, a little for each son. It is almost ceremonial, almost ridiculous. Each mouthful so tiny, it disappears like an apology. Water follows. Not enough, but something. You're there with them in the first night. You feel the stone leaching heat through your legs. You hear a cloth rustle as men try to sleep without enough room or comfort. Hunger, that first night, is still only an irritation. A rude guest, it has not yet unpacked. They talk quietly, not of despair, not yet. They talk of roads, of the western passes in spring, of a horse that once threw a minister into a stream and then looked offended, as if the minister had failed some equine standard of dignity. One of the brothers says he misses hot flatbread. Another says he misses the smell of cedar smoke in the palace courtyard before dawn. Another says if they get out of this, he intends to eat an entire roasted goat by himself and deny everyone else a bite. That gets a few tired smiles. Hunger has not yet taken humor from them. It only sits nearby, listening. Morning comes grey through the high slit. Another bowl arrives, the same. Then another day, then another. Now the body begins its quiet rebellion. Movements slow, voices shorten. The room seems larger and smaller at once. Large because time has stretched it. Small because there is nowhere for thought to go. You smell stale straw, damp stone. Human breath turns sour with emptiness. You hear the scratch of fingernails against the wall as someone marks the days. You feel the cold of the floor, even through cloth. It gets into the knees, into the back, into the temper. No one says rescue is coming after the first few days. They all know what this is. Not execution with swords. Something meaner, a fading, a thinning, a royal problem made to disappear behind a locked door. Sometimes footsteps pause outside, and every man in the room lifts his head at once, like a tethered animal hearing water. Then the steps move on. One evening, a younger brother lunges for the grain before it is divided, not out of wickedness, out of instinct, a hand moving before honor can catch it. Another brother grabs his wrist. For a blink, it seems, they may fight over a handful of life. Subala stops them with a look. That is all. Just a look from a father who no longer has luxuries left to spend. The bowl is divided again. But after that, silence thickens. Because they have all seen the future hiding in one quick movement of the hand. Days pass. Nothing improves. The light from the slit crawls across the wall and leaves again. Dust turns in it like pale ash. At night, the darkness is complete. You can hear breathing, but not faces. Sometimes someone mutters in sleep. Sometimes someone prays. Sometimes someone simply counts. Not sheep, not blessings. Breaths in, out, as if keeping count might keep the self from dissolving. Shakuni watches his father closely. This is what sons do when they realize the world has become a lesson. Subala is growing smaller. The proud line of him remains, but the flesh yields first around the eyes, the cheeks, the mouth. Hunger is an artist with a terrible patience. It carves all men toward the bone, though some hold their shape longer than others. Still, the king stays careful. He makes them sip water slowly. He tells them to lie still when they can. He rations motion like a treasurer rations coin. And one night, when the room is so quiet you can hear the lamp in the corridor hiss beyond the door, he tells them what they all know but have refused to shape into words. Only one of them must live. The sentence settles over the straw and stone and skin like dust. No one moves. If hope had still been standing in the room, that sentence sits it down. One son shakes his head before the father has even finished. Another whispers that there must be another way. Another asks whether the gods can be bribed, overpowered, tricked. This is charming, in the way youth can be charming right up to the point reality answers. There will be no overpowering, no bargaining, no miracle descending the corridor with a key. Subala speaks softly because he no longer has strength for fury and does not need it. The truth is heavy enough. If they all share the grain, they all fade. If one receives it, one may outlast the cruelty. Outlast, not triumph, not escape tomorrow in a shower of heroism. Simply remain. The room goes still in a new way. This is not the stillness of night. It is the stillness of men standing at the edge of a terrible duty. And then comes the second wound. Who? No father should be asked that. No brothers should hear it. Yet, there it is, waiting in the straw between them. Not strongest. Strength burns quickly, not loudest, not noblest in a pretty singing sort of way. The one who remembers. That is the measure now. The one who can keep names alive without softening them. The one who can walk out carrying not only grief, but purpose. Eyes turn toward Shakuni, not because he begs. He does not. Not because he is fragile. He is not. Because he has always watched. Always listened past the words to the thing underneath. In Gandhara, he could read a merchant's smile and know where the silver would vanish before sunset. He could hear a treaty and smell the trap in its perfume. Now that same gift becomes inheritance, an ugly one. You're in the room when he understands. No speech, no grand refusal, no theatrical collapse. Just a young man sitting very still while his future is laid across his shoulders like a wet cloak. He does not want it. Of course he does not. To live when others are choosing to fade so you may continue, that is not a prize. That is a chain made of breath. He says no first. Naturally. Anyone decent would. He says they can still divide it. He says they may endure longer than they think. He says perhaps the door will open. He says the sort of things hope says when it has been cornered but not yet strangled. Subala listens. Then he tells him to stop speaking like a boy. Not harshly, almost tenderly, which somehow hurts more. The decision is made. From that day, the grain goes to Shakuni. Not lavishly. There is nothing lavish left in the world. A few pinches, a few more swallowed under the gaze of men who love him enough to starve with discipline. That is the shape of the nightmare. Not cruelty from enemies. That part is simple. Love performing the unthinkable with its own hands. Every mouthful becomes a burden. He tries to refuse. His brothers force him to take it. One presses the grain into his palm and closes his fingers around it. Another tells him he will dishonor them if he lets all their names vanish in the dark. Another cannot watch and turns his face to the wall. The grain tastes like dust, like shame, like commandment. You can almost feel it on your own tongue, dry and stubborn, needing water the room barely has. After a while, the others begin to slip, not all at once. This is not a thunderclap. It is a lamp going dim by degrees. One brother sleeps longer and wakes less. One stops speaking except to ask what day it is. One hums an old hunting tune under his breath, the same 4 notes, until even those are gone. Subala remains clear-eyed for longer than Shakuni wishes. Fathers are troublesome that way. Even when the body is failing, authority sits upright. He makes Shakuni recite the names of their ancestors. Then the mountain passes. Then the border forts. Then the faces of men in Hastinapura who smiled too smoothly at the wedding. He is teaching a memory, like a general teaching formation. Do not lose the line. Do not lose the names. Do not forgive what was done merely because time grows moss over it. Outside, life goes on with insulting steadiness. Somewhere in the palace kitchens, rice boils. In women's courtyards, anklets chime. Horses are brushed. priests chant. The world is very rude about continuing. That may be the hardest part. Not pain, indifference. You're sitting in that dark with them, and from far away, a temple bell drifts through stone. One clear note, then another. Evening worship. Somewhere ghee lamps are being lit. Somewhere perfumed smoke curls upward. Somewhere silk rustles in halls, bright with carved pillars. And here, a prince counts his brothers by breathing. At times, Shakuni dreams with his eyes open. He sees Gandhara, the winter sun, thin on slate roofs, the narrow roads where traders from Bahalika led shaggy horses through cold dust. His sister before the marriage, laughing at something small, lifting one eyebrow in that exact family way that meant she had understood more than anyone intended her to. Then the dream breaks. Stone wall, thin light, the scrape of a bowl. Hunger brings strange companions. Sometimes anger, sometimes clarity so sharp it almost sings. Sometimes absurd thoughts. A younger brother, before he grows too weak, mutters that if this is royal hospitality, he officially prefers enemies. It earns one dry huff from Shakuni. Even here, the family keeps its teeth. But the room keeps taking from them. A hand grows lighter in his. A shoulder he once leaned against in horseplay becomes only angles beneath cloth. Voices become whispers. Whispers become looks. Looks become stillness. The old king knows the end is near before anyone says it. One night, he asks to be helped upright. The effort costs nearly everyone more than they can spare. Still they do it. Sons lift the father steadies the son who must remain. Subala takes Shakuni's hand. His palm is cool, dry, frighteningly light. He tells him 3 things. Remember, wait, win. That is all. No poetry, no heavenly speeches. A king of Gandhara, reduced to the necessities. Remember what was done. Wait until the throw matters. Win in the manner available to you. Because not every kingdom is defended with chariots. Some are avenged with patience so long it begins to look like personality. After that, the room grows quieter still. How long passes is hard to say. In such places, time stops wearing ornaments. It becomes a bare thread. They say Shakuni was the last to leave. They say, when at last the door opened, the corridor light poured in so hard it seemed like a weapon. He blinked against it, one hand raised, all the names inside him. When the door finally opened, he came out changed. No one who saw him doubted that. He was no longer merely the sharp prince from Gandhara, with a talent for games and a tongue like polished bronze. He carried stillness differently after that, as if every pause had become intentional, as if every smile had one room behind it that no one else could enter. And then comes the strangest part of the whispering tale. The dice. Some say they were ordinary at first. Ivory, polished smooth, pleasant in the fingers. Some say he learned to read weight and angle until cubes obeyed him, the way hawks obey a patient hand. But older whispers go colder. They say before Subala passed from the world, something of the father was reserved. Not with noisy sorcery, nothing so gaudy. Quietly, a remnant, a keeping, a piece of bone, cleaned by time and grief and care, small enough to fit in the palm, hard enough to endure. From that, they say, Shakuni had dice made, not many. A set light as memory and stubborn as a vow. When he touched them, he was not merely gambling, he was laying fingers on family. The making stays in half-light, a craftsman with lowered eyes, a cloth unwrapped, the faint click of carved pieces touching one another for the first time. A craftsman with lowered eyes, a cloth unwrapped, the faint click of carved pieces touching one another for the first time. That is enough. The eerie thing is not horror, it is tenderness. Imagine him alone with them for the first time. Lamps low, night pressing at the lattice, the cubes resting in his hand with a warmth stolen from skin. He rolls them once on a wooden board. The sound is almost nothing, a small, dry rattle. Yet in that rattle are mountain winds, a locked door, brothers turning their faces away so he will eat. From then on, whenever the dice move, that room moves with them. Whenever he smiles across a polished board, stone dust lies hidden beneath the perfume. Whenever others think they are watching a game, he is hearing a bolt slide shut. And so vengeance changes shape, not a sword drawn in daylight, not a charge across a battlefield under banners. Something quieter. Quieter is often worse. He learns the rhythms of the Kuru house more carefully now. Which elder hesitates? Which prince burns hottest? Which servant listens at corners? Which feast leaves men careless? Which insult will ripen if left alone? The hunger in the cell does not make him wild. That would have been simpler for everyone. It makes him patient. Patient men are dangerous in palaces, because palaces are built of waiting, waiting for inheritance, waiting for slighted pride to sour, waiting for one foolish afternoon to become a dynasty's last peaceful memory. You can feel the shape of him forming in the dark, not yet the master of dice in the assembly hall, not yet the uncle leaning toward Duryodhana with soft poison and practical advice. For now he is only a survivor with too much memory and no intention of wasting it. There are nights in Hastinapura later when music floats through the courtyards and wine shines ruby in gold cups, and Shakuni sits among princes as if the world has become civilized again. But beneath every courtesy is that cell. Beneath every jest, those thin rations. Beneath every game, a father's hand light in his own. You know this kind of haunting. It does not rattle chains. It sets places at the table for the absent. Even his affection changes. For Gandhari especially. His sister wrapped herself in chosen darkness for life. He came out of another darkness carrying a different vow. Not spoken before gods, not proclaimed before kings. Those loud vows are for other men. His was quieter. He would not let the house that swallowed his family sleep easily. He would not strike too soon. He would not forget. That is how some revenges survive long enough to become history. Not by roaring, by breathing, by smiling, by waiting for a man like Duryodhana, proud and bruised, and eager for someone to tell him that resentment is wisdom. The cell teaches Shakuni one last lesson before it releases him back into the sun. Hunger is a great simplifier. It strips away decoration, leaves only appetite, memory, and will. Others, once fed again, return gratefully to comfort. But some men keep the hunger, not in the belly, in the mind. That kind does not fade with feasts. It sits through banquets. It watches cousins laugh in jeweled halls. It fingers the dice in a sleeve. It waits for the right board. By the time the door opens in the tale, the kingdom has already been marked. No one in the bright corridors knows it yet. The musicians still tune their strings. The cooks still stir milk with cardamom. Court ladies still trail jasmine through lamp glow. The guards yawn at their posts, and somewhere a young prince from Gandhara steps back into the world, blinking, lean, polite, carrying in his hand the smallest possible sound. A dry rattle, not loud, not yet, but enough to trouble sleep for generations. And when he walks the corridors later, soft-footed as incense smoke. You can almost hear it beneath his bracelets and silk. That little click against the palm, that patient reminder, that room in the dark, still breathing. The prison door opens, but vengeance does not rush. It dresses well, smiles politely, and takes up residence inside the palace. At first, Shakuni moves through Hastinapura like a guest who has stayed just long enough to become impossible to remove. He's always properly dressed, always courteous, always a half step to the side, where a man can see everything and be seen by almost no one. The palace itself is vast, in a different way from Gandhara. Not all sharp stone and mountain wind. This place breathes warm dust, lamp smoke, sesame oil, wet lotus from the inner courtyards, silk brushes painted walls. Bronze doors give off a faint, sun-baked smell by afternoon. In the mornings, the corridors hold coolness for a little while, and then the heat arrives, soft at first, then full and heavy. You can feel it under your feet on the polished floors. Cool at dawn, warm by noon, almost alive by evening. Shakuni learns the palace the way other men learn scriptures. Which stare groans, which eunuch likes sweet beetle and gossip, which maid carries news between the queen's chambers and the old king's apartments, which guards drink too much on festival nights, which ministers walk quickly when they lie, which ones slow down when they are afraid. He notices the little kingdoms inside the kingdom, the old women who control access to the nursery, the stable masters who know which prince has ridden out furious and come back quiet, the kitchen boys who hear everything because no one sees them, the musicians who play near the women's wing and know when a queen has been crying. Nothing is wasted, not a glance, not a hesitation, not a careless laugh. He stores it all. If Gandhara taught him how to survive among stronger neighbors, Hastinapura teaches him something finer. How a great house can begin cracking long before anyone hears the walls split. Dhritarashtra sits in darkness and leans on voices. Bhishma stands like a pillar no one dares move. Vidura watches and worries. Gandhari binds her own eyes and enters silence so deep it startles people. And in the middle of it all, children grow. That is where Shakuni settles. Not in the throne room, in the nursery, in the training grounds, in the gaming court after supper, near the boys, especially one boy. Duryodhana is not yet the hard-faced prince people will fear. He is young enough still to show every feeling before he can hide it. Proud too early, sensitive in all the wrong places, hungry for praise, quick to remember slights, very quick. He clings to Shakuni, almost before either of them means to let it happen. It starts simply. An uncle from his mother's side, a man who does not correct every sentence, a man who does not compare him to the sons of Pandu every 5 breaths, a man who can make carved dice, dance across a low table, and tell stories from the northwest, where the camels groan and the passes swallow armies. Duryodhana listens with both hands around his knees. Dushasana sprawls beside him, loud and eager, and a little too delighted by trouble. The other brothers crowd in and out, a whole rainstorm of princes. But Duryodhana stays closest. Shakuni lets him. He brings little things from Gandhara, knuckle bones polished smooth, carved gaming pieces, a strip of blue wool from a mountain market, a tiny knife with a horn handle, too dull to do harm, and therefore perfect for a prince. He teaches the boys small games of counting and chance, not just luck, memory, rhythm, watching the hand, not the smile. Duryodhana loves this immediately. He is not the best at everything, and children know this before adults admit it. Bhima is stronger. Arjuna is more graceful. Yudhishthira somehow already has the irritating calm of a man twice his age. Even as a boy, he looks as if he were born apologizing to Dharma for other people's behavior. That sort of cousin can be exhausting. Bhima is a storm in human form. He eats as if the kitchen is a battlefield and rice is an enemy formation. He laughs with his whole chest. He runs too hard, wrestles too hard, pushes too hard, and seems honestly confused when furniture breaks. Servants learn to leap out of his path with the speed of deer. At mealtimes, you can almost hear the cooks praying over the grain stores. The smell in those dining halls is thick and glorious. Ghee, roasted barley, cumin, fried cakes, milk simmering with cardamom. Bronze platters gleam. Water jars sweat in the heat. And at the center of it all, Bhima attacks a mountain of food with the focus of a sage seeking liberation. Duryodhana watches him and clenches his jaw. Because Bhima does not merely eat more. He takes up more air, more laughter, more space in everyone's memory. When the boys wrestle in the courtyards, Bhima flips princes into the dust as casually as a farmer turning flatbread. Dushasana charges him again and again and again, which is almost admirable if you ignore the part where it never works. Duryodhana fares better, but not enough better, not enough to enjoy it. Shakuni sees the moment envy first stops being a spark and starts becoming a habit. It comes in fragments. A teacher praising Arjuna's focus, a servant smiling too brightly when Yudhishthira speaks, Bhima dragging 3 boys at once in play while everyone cheers, Kunti watching her sons with tired pride, Bhishma's face softening just slightly at some Pandava accomplishment. That slight softening, that is enough. You are there in the practice yard one evening when the light goes copper and long shadows stretch across the dust. Sweat smells sharp in the heat. Leather bow grips creak. Somewhere beyond the wall, peacocks complain as if the whole world exists to annoy them. Arjuna stands with a bow in hand. He's still young, still growing into himself, but already the movement is there. That unnerving, clean precision. He draws, releases, draws again, and each arrow seems to know where it was born to go. Teachers gather near him as bees gather around sweetness. Drona says little, but his attention says plenty. Bhishma watches. Even the stable boys lean in. Duryodhana watches too. Shakuni is beside him, saying nothing for a while. Then he begins gently, never with poison poured full strength, only a drop at a time. He tells the boy that courts are foolish places. They fall in love with skill. They worship whatever shines. Today an arrow, tomorrow a pious speech. After that, some noble expression on the right face at the right moment. He tells him strength matters, will matters more, and affection, palace affection, court affection, is a very slippery thing. Duryodhana listens. The sun drops lower. Dust settles on their sandals. A conch sounds for evening rites. Something small hardens, not all at once. Stone never cracks that way. It gives along hidden lines. Shakuni makes himself useful in every mood. When the boys are restless, he entertains. When they are sulking, he sympathizes. When they are boasting, he sharpens the boast into ambition. When they are afraid, he gives the fear a name and a target. And when Duryodhana feels overshadowed, Shakuni never says the prince is wrong. That is the gift. Adults around children are always correcting, restraining, smoothing. Shakuni does something far more dangerous. He understands, or at least he performs understanding so perfectly that the difference stops mattering. Duryodhana complains that Bhima humiliates him in sport, and Shakuni nods as if this is not childish irritation, but a serious political problem. He hears that Arjuna receives too much admiration, and Shakuni agrees that admiration, once distributed, tends to gather like crows in one tree. He sees Yudhishthira praised for honesty and says very softly that honest men are often the most inconvenient rivals because people forgive them everything, not loudly, never in public, always in shaded corners, at the edge of a courtyard, during a game, while musicians play in another room and cover the sound. The palace becomes a map of recurring scenes, morning lessons, noon meals, evening games, festival processions, archery contests, wrestling bouts, monsoon afternoons when everyone is trapped indoors and tempers grow moldy. During the rains, Hastinapura smells different. Wet earth rises from the courtyards. Jasmine hangs heavy on the air. The stone walls sweat. The river swells and mutters in the distance. Children who cannot run outside become twice as difficult inside. This is excellent weather for an uncle with dice. Shakuni gathers the princes in pillared rooms, where rain drums on the roof and lamps burn even at midday. He teaches them board games, guessing games, games of probability, games where one careless move, 3 turns earlier, destroys you now. Dushasana likes games that end in shouting. Duryodhana likes games he can master. Yudhishthira likes rules. Of course he does. Yudhishthira is the kind of boy who listens to the full explanation, the whole explanation, every clause. If a game has a rule tucked in a corner, he will remember it. If a wager is made, he will honor it. If a contest begins, he will not walk away halfway through because his pride says so or his mood changes. Shakuni notices this too. He notices everything. Yudhishthira's virtue has a texture. It is smooth, polished, admirable, and very easy to grip. That discovery pleases him in a quiet, private way. For now, though, the boys are still boys. Bhima gets bored with calculation and starts flicking gaming pieces hard enough to knock them off the board. Arjuna learns quickly and then loses interest unless the game requires real skill. Nakula keeps himself absurdly neat, even while sitting cross-legged with a dozen brothers, which feels almost insulting. Sahadeva notices more than he says, which would be comforting if it were not so unsettling. Those twins, always watching with those clear eyes. You sit with them one monsoon afternoon in a hall smelling of damp cotton and lamp smoke. Rain rattles the carved shutters. Somewhere in the kitchens, someone is frying something in ghee, and the scent drifts in warm and irresistible. A peacock lets out one tragic cry from the garden, sounding like a prince who has misplaced a jewel box. On the floor, the gaming board waits. Shakuni's hands are beautiful when he plays. Long fingers, relaxed wrists, not hurried, never greedy. He can make defeat feel educational and victory feel accidental. That way, everyone wants another round, especially Duryodhana. Years pass this way. The boys lengthen, voices deepen, childish quarrels put on armor. Drona arrives fully into their lives then, and the palace changes again. Now the mornings begin earlier. Before sunrise, the grounds already smell of trampled grass, horse sweat, oiled wood, damp leather. The princes train until their tunics cling and their arms ache. Arrows thrum, maces ring, chariot wheels grind over packed earth. Drona is not warm. Warmth is for mothers, wet nurses, and men with less precision. He is exact, demanding. He cuts boys into shape. Arjuna blooms under this. Some students are lucky enough to find the one art that loves them back. Archery loves Arjuna back openly, almost indecently. He learns faster, hits cleaner, stands steadier, receives the teacher's eye, and once again, Duryodhana must swallow that bitter mouthful. Shakuni is there afterward, not always in sight, but near enough. He walks with the prince after lessons, past the elephant stalls and the fig trees and the low walls still warm from the day's heat. He lets Duryodhana talk himself into a fury. Why should one cousin be everyone's favorite? Why should strength count less than precision? Why should the sons of Pandu, who came back fatherless and needy, somehow gather every blessing like men standing under a generous rain? Shakuni does not answer too quickly. Quick answers sound prepared. Prepared answers sound false. He waits, lets the anger rise on its own heat. Then he suggests what wounded pride always longs to hear, that the world is not fair, that simple excellence is not the same as rightful dominance, that thrones do not descend because a teacher smiles at an archer. These things settle deep. Meanwhile, Bhima continues being Bhima, which helps no one trying to maintain family harmony. He teases, he shoves, he drags the Kaurava brothers into ponds. He mocks Duryodhana's dignity, which is one of the fastest ways to produce future catastrophe. Often he means nothing by it. That is almost worse. A cruel enemy can be resisted. A laughing cousin who injures your pride by instinct is much harder to bear. The smell of wet reeds and river mud rises from the palace ponds where these rough games unfold. Boys splash, curse, shove, go under, come up sputtering. Sun flashes on water, gold bracelets fly off, attendants run in panic. Someone always claims it was an accident. Sometimes it even was. Duryodhana comes out of those games with mud on his cheek and murder in his eyes. Shakuni towels him off and says very little, but inside him, old patience smiles. He has learned the household now, down to its pulse. Dhritarashtra loves his sons fiercely and weakly. That combination is a feast for disaster. The blind king wants to be just. He also wants never to hear his children accused. Those desires do not share a bed well. Gandhari loves Duryodhana too, but she carries her love like a vow, heavy, controlled. She rebukes when needed, blesses carefully. Her sorrow has always been older than her children. Shakuni knows this better than anyone. He visits her often. In her chambers, the air is cool with sandal paste and fresh linen. Lamps burn low. The rustle of silk is quieter there. She sits blindfolded, straight-backed, regal, listening with an attention that unsettles even practiced liars. Shakuni speaks gently with her, of Gandhara, of old seasons, of her sons. He does not pour his full mind into her hands. She would feel the poison in it. But he lets enough of his concern show that she trusts his devotion to her children. That part, at least, is real. Real love is the best disguise. It never slips. Sometimes he leaves her chambers and passes Kunti in another corridor. Kunti, with the face of a woman who has endured too much and plans to endure the rest out of sheer refusal to break. Kunti, who watches everything concerning her sons. Kunti, who knows danger by scent now. They exchange courtesy. Nothing more, nothing less. It is almost elegant, this household. So much disaster in such good manners. You can feel it at festivals, most of all. The palace fills with marigolds and smoke from clarified butter. Conches boom. Temple bells tremble in the morning air. Princes in fresh silk stand beside one another, gleaming with oils and jewels, while priests chant over sacred fires. From a distance, they are a family. From close up, they are a bundle of oaths waiting for a spark. Shakuni stands beside Duryodhana through all of it. At hunts, at feasts, at exhibitions, at those long royal afternoons when elders discuss policy, and boys must learn the art of sitting still while wanting very much not to. He teaches Duryodhana another art too, how to wait. That is not natural to the prince. Duryodhana wants, immediately, completely, without sharing, like a child reaching for the largest sweet on the tray and resenting the tray itself for existing. Shakuni begins shaping that hunger. He turns impatience into strategy, insult into memory, defeat into future debt. A word overlooked by others will be preserved. A laugh from Bhima will be polished and kept. A compliment given to Yudhishthira in public will return later in private, heavier than before. An honor granted, Arjuna will become proof of conspiracy by nightfall. Not because Shakuni shouts it so, because he places each thought quietly where it can grow, like seeds, very bitter seeds. Then comes the tournament. By now the princes are nearly men, and the city is restless to see what all this training has made. Crowds gather, dust rises under thousands of feet, trumpets and conches blast. Women lean from balconies behind screens. The arena smells of sun-hot wood, horsehide, sweat, flowers crushed under sandals. You are there when they enter, the Kauravas in one shining line, the Pandavas in another. Banners lifting, armor bright, young faces tight with pride. The crowd roars for all of them, then roars louder for some. Bhima and Duryodhana display the mace. The air changes when they fight. You feel it in your ribs. Heavy weapons hum and crash. Dust leaps. Spectators rise half out of their seats. The two of them circle with that old hatred, now fully muscled and given form. It is not sport anymore. Not really. Teachers intervene before it goes too far. Then Arjuna steps forward, and the whole arena bends toward him. He displays archery that makes people forget to breathe. Targets struck by sound, by speed, by movement too quick for ordinary eyes. A prince becoming legend while still young enough to blush under praise. Shakuni watches Duryodhana watching Arjuna. That matters more than the performance itself. Then Karna arrives, like a blade sliding quietly from a sheath. Unknown, radiant, proud, furious by nature. Even before insult touches him, he matches Arjuna feet for feet and throws the arena into astonishment. Then comes the question of birth. Who is he? Whose son? What right has he to challenge a prince? And Duryodhana, quick as a gambler's hand, seizes the moment. He raises Karna, makes him king of Anga, gives him rank before anyone can deny him space. It is a magnificent stroke, generous, defiant, theatrical. Shakuni feels pleasure then, real pleasure, because this, finally, is a move worthy of his nephew. He encourages the friendship immediately. Karna is exactly the kind of ally Duryodhana needs. Wounded pride wrapped in brilliance. A man who will repay recognition with a lifetime of fire. Now the circle around the prince tightens. Dushasana for obedience, Karna for glory, Shakuni for strategy. A dangerous trio, and not one of them inclined toward surrender. In the evenings, after the noise of court softens, they sit together in lamplight. You can almost see the pattern forming. The room smells of oil lamps, spiced wine, and the faint dry fragrance of reed mats, warming under the night air. Outside, the city settles. Dogs bark in far lanes. Somewhere, a flute drifts up from a servant's quarter. The moon paints the courtyard white. Duryodhana speaks of succession, not openly at first, only in hints. His father is king. Why should the sons of Pandu overshadow him? Why should Yudhishthira, with that maddening righteousness, seem to gather the idea of kingship around himself merely by standing quietly in a hall? Karna supports him fiercely. He has no patience for rank worship unless it serves his friend. Dushasana agrees with whatever sounds most likely to end in someone else's discomfort. Shakuni guides. He reminds Duryodhana that affection influences elders, appearance influences crowds, virtue influences reputation, and reputation in palaces is sometimes stronger than law. So a prince who would rule must do more than inherit. He must outmaneuver. This becomes their nightly education, not scrolls and recitations. Those the teachers handle. Shakuni teaches another curriculum, where pride is useful, where mercy is wasteful, when patience is stronger than force, when force should be made to look like insult answered, how a public slight can be turned into a private campaign, how men reveal themselves over games faster than in council, especially over games. Duryodhana begins to understand that the gaming board is not separate from the world. It is the world, reduced and made honest. Desire, risk, bluff, commitment, loss. Yudhishthira's love of the game becomes known slowly, almost innocently. Not obsession yet, only fondness. A prince who enjoys play, who honors wagers, who does not refuse invitation. Shakuni files this away with the care of a jeweler storing a gem. He does not touch it. Not yet. For now he keeps being the ideal uncle. Generous with time, excellent with stories, ready with laughter, ready also when needed, with outrage on Duryodhana's behalf. That last one is precious. A boy can survive discipline. He may even benefit from it. But the person who feels offended for him, who mirrors and magnifies his grievance, that person becomes unforgettable. Years have passed. The boys are men, and the palace no longer needs raised voices to know trouble is ripening. It is in how Duryodhana enters a room when the Pandavas are praised, in how Bhima's jokes now land with sharper edges, in how Arjuna's gifts shine too brightly, in how Yudhishthira is spoken of by elders with that dangerous word attached to his name, worthy, worthy, to a prince who believes the throne should come through his father and then through him. It is an infuriating word. Shakuni hears it and smiles the small smile of a man hearing distant thunder after months of heat. You walk the corridor with him one last time in this season before open catastrophe. Night has fallen. The stone is cool again. Torchlight ripples over pillars. The palace smells of ash, sandalwood, old flowers, and the river breathing in the dark beyond the walls. From one chamber comes laughter. From another, chanting. From another, a child crying in sleep, though there are hardly children left now. Somewhere dice click softly against wood. Shakuni pauses. He has done what patient men do. He has stayed, watched, fed what was already hungry, taught bitterness to sit upright, dress itself, and speak like policy. And Duryodhana, no longer a boy, is ready for larger games, not yet the greatest one. That comes in time. For now the uncle moves through Hastinapura, as if he belongs there, though some part of him never will. His sandals whisper over polished stone. His ring flashes in torchlight. His face wears that same courteous calm. But in his wake, small resentments have learned to march in formation. The night deepens around the palace. Servants lower lamps. The last trays are carried from supper halls, smelling of lentils, ghee, sweet milk, and smoke. Guards settle spears against shoulders. Wind stirs the banners once, then lets them hang. And somewhere behind a half-closed door, on a board marked by use, Shakuni rolls the dice again, softly, as if teaching a kingdom how to listen. At last the day arrives, when all his patience fits into one small pouch, and the whole empire gathers to hear it rattle. Morning lifts slowly over Hastinapura. By noon the assembly hall is bright as a jewel box split open. Lamps burn, though the sun is already strong, because kings like extra light when they mean to look magnificent. Ghee flames tremble in bronze bowls. Sandalwood smoke curls above carved pillars. Gold shines from armlets, anklets, diadems, sword hilts. The polished floor throws back every color until the whole hall seems to shimmer like heat above stone. And in the middle of it all sits a low board for dice. Small thing, barely worth noticing. If you did not know what men can pour into a game, you can feel the whole before you understand it. The air is too still. Silk rustles and stops. Necklaces click softly as men turn their heads. Somewhere near the doors, a conch had sounded at the opening of court. But that noise is gone now. What remains is quieter and worse. Expectation. Shakuni enters as if this were any other afternoon. No thunder around him, no display, just his narrow shoulders under fine cloth from the northwest, his clever hands, his face arranged in that mild, faintly amused calm that always makes people underestimate how awake he is. At his side is Duryodhana, handsome and hard-eyed, carrying grievance like a second spine. Dushasana comes too, restless as a dog that has smelled a fight. Karna is there, bright and severe. Dhritarashtra sits blind upon the throne, hearing everything. Bhishma sits beneath his white hair and great vow. Drona is grave, Kripa still. Vidura already looks like a man who has heard the crack of a beam before the roof falls. And then the Pandavas arrive. Yudhishthira first. He comes with the dignity that has made people trust him all his life. He has bathed. His garments are clean. His jewels are proper, not ostentatious. He looks exactly like a king who should not be walking into a trap, and exactly like a king who will do it anyway, because custom has put a hand on his shoulder and guided him forward. Behind him comes Bhima, broad as a gate and visibly unhappy to be indoors when trouble is brewing. Arjuna glances once around the hall and misses very little. Nakula and Sahadeva move with that same quiet, dangerous grace. Men look at them and think beauty means softness. Men are often inventive in the ways they are wrong. The smell reaches you in layers. Oil from the lamps, lotus garlands beginning to warm, cedar from polished furniture, old stone cooling in shadow, and under it all the dry, human scent of nerves. This is no feast. This is a room holding its breath. Yudhishthira had been invited. That is the ugly neatness of it. Invited to a friendly game, invited by kin, invited under royal courtesy. And he, bound by the habits of kings, has come. He knows Shakuni's hands are dangerous. He knows dice are a fever. He knows Duryodhana does not invite from affection. Still he comes because refusal carries its own shame, and because duty can be a very elegant road to disaster. The board is set between them. Shakuni does not hurry. He sits, adjusts the edge of his cloth, and draws out the pouch. There it is. A small, soft sound. Bone or ivory, knocking together. Rattle, not loud, almost intimate. But the sound runs through the hall like a tiny cold animal. You are close enough to imagine the feel of the dice in his palm, smooth with use, warm from skin, weighted by memory. His fingers close around them as though they were old friends, which, in a way, they are. Duryodhana begins the business. He cannot quite hide his pleasure. He tells the hall that if Yudhishthira wishes to play, Shakuni will cast on his behalf. A simple arrangement, he makes it seem. A courtesy, an uncle helping a nephew. That is one of the tricks of great wrongdoing. It often arrives dressed for dinner. Yudhishthira does not like it. Everyone can see that much. He says, in the measured way of a man trying to remain upright on bad ground, that gambling is poison. It turns sense to smoke. It is no true test of courage, no clean field for honor. He says Shakuni is skilled in a way that makes the contest crooked before it starts. And still he sits down, because challenge has been offered, because kings are watched, because pride and propriety are cousins who love to travel together. Shakuni listens with his head slightly bent, almost respectful. Then he answers with softness. If the king fears the game, he need not play. That is all. No pressure, no insult. Just that little thread laid out in public where everyone can see it. If he fears the game, that does it. You can watch Yudhishthira's face become stiller, which is how some men show they have already lost the first round. He agrees. The first wagers are almost innocent. Jewels, gold, necklaces from treasury chests, caskets of pearls, bright heaps of worked silver, fine carpets, horses, servants. Shakuni casts, calls the throw, wins again. The dice strike the board with a flat, neat sound. Tak, tak, tak. A temple bell could not have been more exact. The hall begins to change around that sound. At first, there is polite attention, then lean shoulders, then tightened mouths. The musicians at the edge of the chamber do not play now. Even the servants step more carefully, as if frightened of dropping a cup into history. Yudhishthira wagers more. He keeps thinking the next cast may turn. That is the thing about a game once it enters the blood. The last loss demands repair. The next chance shines brighter than reason. A man can watch his house drift downriver and still say he is only stepping in to retrieve one more cup. Shakuni is patient. He never looks feverish, never desperate, never wild. He looks comfortable. That may be the most terrible part. When he throws, his wrist moves with almost lazy ease. When he speaks, his voice is light enough to pass for harmlessness. Sometimes he smiles toward Duryodhana without taking his eyes from the board. Once, when a pile of gems changes hands yet again, Dushasana lets out a sharp little laugh and then tries to swallow it. He cannot. It comes out anyway, ugly and eager. Bhima hears it. Bhima's nostrils flare. His great hands open and close against his knees. You can almost hear the thought passing through him. All this could be settled so much faster with a mace. Fair thought, honestly, not sophisticated, but honest. Vidura cannot keep silent. At last he speaks into the hall with that dry, grave voice that has tried for years to keep this family from walking into its own reflection with a torch. He warns Dhritarashtra. He warns the assembly. He says this path leads to ruin. He says a man maddened by greed should be restrained, not indulged. He says Duryodhana is dragging the whole house toward flame. You can feel the words land. You can also feel them fail. Dhritarashtra shifts on the throne. Blind eyes, old fear, old weakness. He asks questions. He hesitates. He wants peace without offending his son. He wants righteousness without the inconvenience of acting righteous. An exhausting preference, one that has already cost everyone dearly. Duryodhana burns at Vidura's rebuke. He throws back anger, accusation, the old bitterness that Vidura always sides with the sons of Pandu. He says enough to sour the air completely. Dhritarashtra does not stop him. Vidura falls silent, but not because he has changed his mind. Because some warnings are stones dropped into wells too deep to answer. The game goes on. Now the stakes grow teeth. Chariots plated with gold, war elephants, lines of horses, cities, storehouses, attendants, whole revenues of whole provinces. Shakuni wins them all. The sound of dice on wood becomes unbearable because it remains so small. Empires should fall with thunder, not with a click. You're standing in that hall now, or it feels that way. You can smell heated metal from the lamps. You can feel sweat gathering where cloth touches the spine. Somewhere, a garland has begun to wilt, and its sweetness has gone heavy, almost overripe. This is the moment when luxury starts to smell tired. Yudhishthira's brothers watch. Arjuna's face has gone bright and hard, like steel catching light. Nakula and Sahadeva sit motionless. Too motionless, Bhima no longer hides his disgust. He mutters once, low and rough, that gamblers deserve hands burned for what they do. It is not a suggestion anyone takes up, though it might have improved the afternoon. Still Yudhishthira wagers. He loses the treasury. He loses the kingdom. Indraprastha, the city raised from wild ground, jeweled and magnificent, full of avenues and fountains and all the labor of hope, passes across a little board under Shakuni's hand. Just like that, not metaphorically, not poetically, a city is lost because a cube of carved chance kissed polished wood. There is a stir in the hall then, not loud, more like wind passing through dry leaves. Kings glance at one another. Some cannot believe the thing has gone this far. Some absolutely can. Karna watches with fierce approval. Dushasana is delighted. Duryodhana sits very straight, satisfaction glittering on him like a blade kept lovingly sharp. And Shakuni looks almost serene. He has waited years for this room, this board, this nephew's hunger, this king's weakness, this perfect alignment of pride and law and silence. His revenge does not arrive roaring, it arrives organized. Once the kingdom is gone, sanity should return. It does not. That is one of the oldest horrors in the world. There is a point at which loss should sober a man, but instead it empties him of scale. If everything is already ruined, then one more ruin feels strangely light. Shakuni asks gently whether Yudhishthira has anything left. And Yudhishthira does. He has his brothers. For one suspended heartbeat, the hall seems to lean backward from what it hears. Even the lamps look startled. Yudhishthira stakes Nakula first. Why Nakula? Some in the hall may think because he is not the strongest. Some because he is Madri's son, not Kunti's. Whatever the reason, it is a dreadful thing to watch a brother named like property. Nakula, beautiful as spring and deadly as a hidden blade, says nothing. The throw is cast. Shakuni wins. Then Sahadeva, lost. Next, Arjuna, lost. Bhima. For a moment you think the hall itself may crack. Bhima, who could uproot rage like a tree. Bhima, who has eaten in this palace, laughed in this palace, sworn terrible promises in this palace. Bhima, reduced to a wager by the brother he obeys. Shakuni wins again. The dice do not even seem excited by their work. Tak, 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 the brothers are gone. Now only Yudhishthira remains. Surely now he stops. But shame has him by the throat. Pride has him by the wrist. The stunned, impossible desire to undo everything with one turn has become a fever in his eyes. He stakes himself. Lost. There it is. The king of Dharma sits, having gambled away his wealth, his land, his brothers, and his own freedom. You can hear jewelry moving when people breathe. No one wants to be the first to speak, because the first word spoken after such a fall would have to admit that the floor has disappeared. It is Duryodhana who fills that silence. Of course it is. He leans into victory with the ugly appetite of a man who has wanted not merely to win, but to make the other side kneel and know it. He has Yudhishthira beaten and bound by the rules of the game. A decent man would stop. A merely practical one would stop. Duryodhana has never been endangered by decency or moderation. He asks if Yudhishthira has anything left. And the answer, impossibly, is yes. Draupadi, the queen. The woman won at a Swayamvara by Arjuna's skill. The woman shared by 5 brothers under a mother's unguarded command and destiny's grim efficiency. The woman dragged through exile and palace intrigue, who carried fire in her eyes and insult in her memory. She is not in the hall. She is in her chambers, unaware that men are deciding whether she can be thrown like a jewel onto a board. You feel the temperature drop. Even among hardened men, there is a limit at which the spirit recoils. Bhishma's face changes. Drona lowers his gaze. Vidura goes pale with anger. He speaks again, stronger now. He says this is madness. He says a man who has lost himself has no right to stake another. He says the assembly is racing into sin with open eyes. But Duryodhana wants the last cruelty. Shakuni gives him the means. He asks the question with smooth precision, leads Yudhishthira to the edge, and the king steps over it himself. He wagers Draupadi. The throw is cast. Shakuni wins. For a long instant, nobody moves. Then the hall becomes a place unfit for the gods. Duryodhana orders that Draupadi be brought, not invited, brought. A messenger is sent first. He goes to the women's chambers, through scented corridors, where the air is cool and the floor has been strewn with fresh petals. He reaches the queen and tells her the unthinkable, that Yudhishthira lost her in dice, and she is summoned to the assembly. Draupadi does not come. Instead, she sends back a question, sharp as a spear point and cleaner than anyone's conscience in that room. She asks whether the king lost himself before or after he staked her. If before, what right had he left? She asks the one question no coward wants in public, because it requires thought before appetite. The messenger returns with it. The question falls into the hall and begins to expose everyone. You are standing there as it lands. You can almost hear minds turning, not toward justice, but toward escape. Bhishma, mighty and wise, admits the matter is subtle. Subtle. Imagine the word floating in air, thick with shame. Drona does not stop it. Kripa does not stop it. Dhritarashtra does not stop it. Men who can name every rule of kingship suddenly find the thread too tangled when a woman's dignity hangs from it. Only Vidura keeps striking the gong of truth. He condemns the act openly. He calls it vile. He calls those rejoicing in it fools. His words ring clear enough to clean the hall for one breath. Then Duryodhana dirties it again. He sends another command. Bring her. Dushasana goes. There are footsteps in the corridor. Fast, hard, then absence. Then more waiting, and the waiting itself turns monstrous. The queen is still not in the room, but her coming already darkens everything. It hangs over the court like monsoon thunder you can smell before the first drop falls. Somewhere outside, beyond the carved screens, a peacock cries. It sounds almost human. Then Dushasana returns. He has not persuaded her. He has seized her. Draupadi is dragged into the hall, clothed in a single garment, her hair disordered, anger blazing brighter than fear. She has been in the inner chambers, unprepared for court, unprepared for this ambush, and yet when she enters, she carries herself with more majesty than any man seated there. You feel it at once. The shame belongs to the room, not to her. She stands before elders, husbands, kings, teachers, relatives. Her eyes move from face to face, seeking one soul still alive enough to stop this. The perfumes of the women's quarters still cling faintly to her. Jasmine, saffron, hair oil, with a trace of smoke from lamps. And those scents now mix horribly with the heavy masculine odor of court and armor and ambition. It is like a garland thrown into a furnace. She asks her question again. Was she won lawfully or not? She asks the assembly to answer. No one answers cleanly. Bhishma says dharma is difficult to know in such a matter. Again that failure of nerve wrapped in wisdom's robes. He is not lying exactly. The law is tangled, but truth is not. A woman has been dragged into court after being wagered by a man who had already lost himself. And the elders sit like carved wood. Draupadi turns to them all. To Dhritarashtra on the throne, to Bhishma, to Drona, to Kripa, to the men who taught princes and praised honor and guarded lineage and wore their virtue like white cloth in sunlight. Still, no one acts. Then a smaller voice breaks from the Kaurava side. Vikarna, one of Dhritarashtra's sons, not the famous one, not the loud one of the many, which in that family was almost a guarantee of being overlooked. But he rises and says what the room should have said long before. He argues that Draupadi was not fairly won. He speaks plainly, bravely, while older men stare at the floor. For a heartbeat, the whole remembers how to breathe. Then Karna crushes it. He mocks Vikarna's youth. He throws harsh words at Draupadi, cruel words, words sharpened by old resentment from her Swayamvara, when she had refused him before all kings. He says she has many husbands and therefore deserves no special regard. He tells Dushasana to strip the Pandavas of their upper garments and to take Draupadi's robe as well. There are moments when wickedness does not creep, it strides. The Pandavas, now declared lost, remove their princely ornaments. Cloth falls. Gold is set aside. The humiliation spreads like spilled oil. Bhima shakes with rage. Arjuna's jaw tightens until it seems carved from one piece. Nakula and Sahadeva burn quietly, which is somehow worse to witness. And Dushasana reaches for Draupadi's garment. Everything in the room narrows. The lamps, the pillars, the polished board, Shakuni's calm hands, Duryodhana leaning forward, Dhritarashtra listening, the elders failing, a queen standing alone. You can feel your own pulse in your palms. Draupadi stops pleading with men. That is the turning point. You can see it in her face. Hope in the assembly dies. Something greater rises in its place. She lifts her mind and heart beyond the hall, beyond the throne, beyond these jeweled failures. She calls inward and upward to Krishna, to the one presence not trapped by court custom or cowardice. Dushasana pulls. The cloth does not end. He drags one length away. Another remains. He pulls again. Another. Again. Fold after fold. Color after color. Garment after garment, seeming to appear as fast as he can seize them. Cloth begins to heap upon the floor in rolling piles. Blue, red, saffron, white, deep green. Silk whispering over silk. The sound becomes uncanny. a rushing fabric rain. The whole hall stares. Dushasana strains, sweats, pants, grows wild with the effort. His arms labor, his breath roughens. He pulls until his strength begins to fail. And still the rope keeps coming, endless as mercy, inexhaustible as the grace he had not counted on. You smell hot ghee from the lamps, spilled perfume from crushed garlands, the dust risen from frantic feet. You see the cloth spread like a river over polished wood. You hear bangles trembling against Draupadi's wrists as she stands untouched at the center of the storm. At last, Dushasana can do no more. He sinks back spent and shamed. The queen remains covered. A murmur rolls through the hall, low and frightened. Even men eager for evil are uneasy when the divine enters the room uninvited. Some drop their eyes. Some stare harder, as if disbelief could rescue them from what they have just witnessed. Shakuni, for once, is still, not afraid exactly, but measuring, always measuring. Bhima cannot bear another breath of it. He rises in fury and makes his vow. He swears that one day he will tear open Dushasana in battle and drink his life. The words hit the chamber like a thrown mace. Sleep contentment, this is not, but it is mythic, distant, and terrible in exactly the old epic way. He also swears that Duryodhana's thigh, insolently slapped and displayed, will be broken by him before the end. The hall hears and shivers, because everyone believes him. Duryodhana, drunk on victory and too proud to feel danger, even when it stands in front of him, breathing like a bull, does the stupid thing only a favored prince could do. He slaps his thigh and gestures toward Draupadi with an obscenity of posture, inviting her to sit there. It is filth wrapped in royal silk. Bhima's eyes become murder's promise. Shakuni sees all this. He sees revenge flowering exactly as intended and also beyond intent. This is the strange moment when a fire set for warmth takes the roof. For years, he has fed Duryodhana's grievance, sharpened his sense of injury, polished his contempt, taught him to see the Pandavas not as kin but as obstacles. Now the machine runs beautifully and horribly on its own. Vidura speaks once more, his voice nearly breaking with outrage. He says the house is doomed if this continues. He says no good can come of insulting a woman of such virtue, of such fiery dignity. His words are true enough to make the hair rise on your arms. At last, omens begin to trouble even the comfortable. Some hear jackals cry, birds wheel strangely. The air feels wrong. And Gandhari, away in her own chambers of chosen darkness, learns enough to be alarmed. Dhritarashtra finally moves. Not because justice has suddenly awakened in him whole and blazing. He is not built for such late miracles. He moves because fear has reached him. Fear of curses, fear of omens, fear of the destruction gathering around his beloved son's delight. Fear, at last, accomplishing what righteousness could not. He addresses Draupadi with formal softness, calls her noble, calls her daughter, offers her a boon, one boon, then another. Draupadi, standing in the wreckage of the afternoon with a steadiness that humbles the room, does not ask for jewels or revenge or comfort. She asks first for Yudhishthira's freedom, granted. Then for the freedom of the other brothers with their weapons, granted. Offered a third boon, she refuses. Enough, she says in effect. Greed has already ruined this hall. There is grandeur in that restraint. You feel the room loosen just slightly. A catastrophe has been checked, not undone, checked. The Pandavas are freed, their ornaments returned, the kingdom restored. For a moment, it seems the worst has passed. Men shift, breathe. Some imagine they may yet leave this day behind like a bad dream. They do not know Duryodhana. He's not finished. Humiliation had been his seed. Victory is not enough. He wants repetition. He wants certainty. He wants his cousins broken beyond repair. And Shakuni, sitting beside him with that elegant patience, is ready with the next move as naturally as a cobra is ready with another coil. Before the Pandavas can fully depart, before the hall can cleanse itself, Duryodhana demands another game. One more throw, one more set of terms. The proposal is made with poisonous neatness. No need to replay the whole disaster. Just a final wager to settle everything. If the Pandavas lose, they will go to the forest for 12 years and then live 1 year hidden from all eyes. If discovered, in that 13th year, exile begins again. If they win, all is theirs. It is madness. Vidura knows it. Bhishma knows it. Drona knows it. Dhritarashtra certainly knows enough to stop it. He does not. Maybe he is tired. Maybe weak. Maybe already half ruled by his son. Maybe all three. The result is the same. Silence where command should be. Yudhishthira should refuse. He does not. This is the agony of him. Noble, truthful, generous, capable of deep endurance. And yet, once the snare of dice closes around his judgment, he walks back into it, as if driven by something older than will. Perhaps shame. Perhaps fatalism. Perhaps the belief that if elders permit it, he must endure it. Whatever the chain, it is strong. He sits again. You almost want to close your eyes, but no one in that hall is allowed the luxury Gandhari chose for herself long ago. They must see this. Shakuni takes up the dice once more. By now the sound is infamous. It needs no introduction. Rattle, cast, win. It is over almost before the breath leaves your chest. The Pandavas lose. Just like that, the hall has done it again. The same men, the same pillars, the same lamps burning lower now, their flames beginning to gutter in cups of oil. Afternoon has tilted toward evening. Shadows have lengthened along the floor. What began glittering now looks exhausted. Flowers droop. Smoke from the lamps hangs thicker. Even wealth seems sticky by this hour, as if gold itself regrets being present. The sentence is spoken. 12 years in the forest, 1 year hidden. If discovered, begin again. Draupadi, who had walked out of disaster once by sheer force of dignity and divine grace, must now go with her husbands into exile. The brothers remove what remains of royal ease and prepare for the wild. Bhima storms. Arjuna burns quietly. Nakula and Sahadeva lower their heads, but not their pride. Yudhishthira looks like a man hearing destiny close behind him. And Shakuni, he has done it, not with armies, not with sieges, not with the smashing of gates, with invitation, with courtesy, with loaded laughter, with an old hand and a little board. From the center of the kingdom, he has set the blaze. As the Pandavas leave the assembly, the hall does not cheer quite as loudly as Duryodhana hoped. Even triumph tastes strange now. Too much has happened. Too many boundaries have been trampled. Servants watch from doorways with frightened eyes. Elders sit as if years have been added to them in one afternoon. Vidura looks stricken. Dhritarashtra has preserved his son and imperiled his line. Karna remains fierce, but the room around him feels colder. Dushasana grins, though not quite as broadly as before. Duryodhana glows with that dangerous relief only spite can produce. You can almost hear the kingdom cracking, in places no mason can reach. Outside, the evening wind moves through the courtyards. Dust stirs. A banner rope knocks softly against a pole. In the women's quarters, someone is already weeping. The Pandavas walk out toward exile. The Kauravas remain amid lamps and carved stone. And Shakuni, uncle from the dry northwest, gathers his dice back into their pouch one by one. They make that same small sound as before, soft, ordinary, almost gentle, rattle, only now the whole empire hears fire in it. And long after the hall empties, long after sandals whisper out across the polished floor, long after the last courtier backs away bowing, that sound seems to remain in the darkening chamber. Dice against palm, bone against bone. A patient hand closing. Outside, dusk settles over Hastinapura. The marble gives back the day's heat. The lamps sink lower. The sandalwood smoke thins and drifts upward, thread by thread. And in the great hall, where kings once spoke of law and honor, a strip of fallen silk still lies across the floor, catching the last gold light. While somewhere far off, beyond the gates, the road to the forest opens under a deepening sky. The smell changes first. Not in the forest, in the palace. The same kitchens still turn out rice, milk, cardamom, roasted meats, sugared cakes. The same bronze trays gleam. The same servants hurry on quiet feet. But after the dice game, every feast in Hastinapura carries a faint taste of ashes, as if the smoke has somehow slipped into the ghee. But dice are only the spark. After that comes the long dry season, when everyone can smell smoke and almost nobody leaves the house. The Pandavas go north and west and deeper, away from carved pillars and perfumed halls, into the rough honesty of exile. Silk gives way to bark cloth. Gold clasps give way to knots. The sound around them changes from conch shells and court drums to river water over stones, monkeys in the trees, the cough of deer in the brush at dusk. And in Hastinapura, Shakuni stays. Of course he stays. A man does not spend years loosening every beam in a house just to leave before the roof begins to groan. You can feel the split of the world now. In one place, forest shade and hunger. In another, polished halls and bad sleep. In the forest, Yudhishthira walks with that same grave face, though now his feet are dusty and thorns catch at the hem of his garment. Bhima breaks branches with his bare hands because sometimes a tree is easier to argue with than fate. Arjuna's mind has already gone ahead of him toward weapons, vows, future reckonings. Nakula and Sahadeva tend horses when there are horses, tend fires when there are only fires, and keep the camp from becoming misery with legs. Draupadi walks among them like a flame carried in cupped hands. She has not forgotten the hall, not for one heartbeat. The smell hits you before the scene settles. Wood smoke, wild neem, damp leaves, and lentils simmering in a blackened pot. Bark garments rub rough against skin. At night, the forest goes silver under moonlight, and every root seems placed by some old sage to trip princes who once walked on marble. Draupadi speaks often in those years, and when she does, the air itself seems to sharpen. She reminds her husbands what was done. She remembers hands in her hair. She remembers laughter. She remembers elders sitting still as painted idols, while shame filled the room. Her words are not the words of someone willing to let time smooth anything over. Bhima needs no reminding. He carries his vows like iron hidden under cloth. Sometimes, when camp is quiet and the fire has burned low, he sits apart, cracking nuts in one hand, as if they personally offended him. The sound travels through the dark, little hard snaps, one after another. If resentment ever took human shape and learned table manners, it might look like Bhima at supper. Yudhishthira, bears exile differently. He receives sages, he listens, he speaks of duty and endurance and the long road of consequence. The forest fills with visitors, ascetics with matted hair, kings in hiding, brahmanas with stories older than cities. They come under sal trees, carrying staffs and water pots, and around the fire at night, the exile becomes, strangely, a school, but a hard one. Nobody there gets to skip the lesson. Meanwhile, in Hastinapura, Duryodhana has won exactly what he wanted and somehow enjoys it less every month. That is the funny thing about swallowing poison to spite your cousin. You still swallowed poison. He sits in the hall that should now taste sweet to him. He wears gems. He hears flatterers sing of his power. He watches courtiers bow. Yet the victory will not settle in his belly. It keeps shifting. Sour, restless, not enough. Because the Pandavas are gone, yes, but they are not broken. As long as they breathe somewhere under the sky, his triumph feels unfinished. And Shakuni sees this at once. He moves through the palace like a man who knows where every draught enters. His robe hems whisper over stone. His rings click softly against carved chair arms. He leans close to Duryodhana in lamplit chambers and feeds the one appetite that never says thank you. Not contentment. Never that. Only more. You are standing in one of those evening rooms now, with perfumed lamps burning low and summer heat trapped in the curtains. Mango wine sits untouched. Musicians play in another courtyard, too far away to help. Duryodhana is restless. Karna is fierce and certain. Dushasana is pleased with himself in the way only fools can be. And Shakuni, with that tired, clever smile, keeps their anger from cooling. Years pass like this. The exile lengthens. In the forest, the Pandavas wander from hermitage to hermitage, from riverbank to mountain path. Arjuna leaves for a time, climbing north toward impossible weapons and harsher disciplines. The brothers remain with Draupadi and the sages, surviving heat, rain, and memory. Monsoon comes, then another. The first rain strikes the dry earth with a smell so rich it almost feels edible. Leaves darken. Frogs begin their mad evening choruses. Cloth refuses to dry. Firewood sulks. Everything grows. Grass, vines, silence, resolve. You can hear it at night. Rain drumming on leaves. Insects singing from every direction. Bhima turning in sleep like a cartwheel rolling over gravel. And in Hastinapura, the palace roof sings a different song. Rain on copper. Rain spilling from lion-faced gutters. Rain trapping nobles indoors with their thoughts. Gandhari hears more than most. She cannot see the shape of the trouble, but she knows its weight. Mothers know strange things. A son enters a room, and the air itself tells on him. Duryodhana's footsteps have become heavier, more abrupt, more final. The old softness, such as it ever existed, has gone. Around him cling the smells of oil, leather, ambition, and the stale smoke of old anger constantly stirred. Kunti, away from the court, carries another grief entirely. Her sons live, yes, but they live on roots and wild grains, while the kingdom that should have sheltered them belongs to those who shamed them. She thinks of them under storm clouds. She thinks of Draupadi sleeping on the ground. She thinks of Karna too, though she speaks that thought to almost no one. Mothers in this epic carry enough secrets to sink a ferry. And Shakuni, he does not soften. That is what years do to some men. They sand down edges. They cool old fevers. To Shakuni, the years become seasoning on the blade. Then comes the visit to the forest. Duryodhana, unable to be satisfied with ruling, decides he must also witness the exile with his own eyes. He travels out in splendor, with attendants, women, banners, polished chariots, and all the bad judgment a comfortable man can carry into wild country. The forest watches him arrive, with peacocks screaming from the trees as if even the birds are embarrassed for him. The lake is cool, the reeds bend, dragonflies skim the surface, and almost at once the whole display goes wrong. The Gandharvas, celestial warriors with no patience for mortal arrogance, block the Kauravas and bring Duryodhana down in humiliation. For a bright, ridiculous moment, the prince, who wanted to gloat, ends up a prisoner in the woods, like some overdressed merchant who took a wrong turn after lunch. The news reaches the Pandavas. Bhima, naturally, is delighted. This is the kind of joy that keeps a man warm. But Yudhishthira will not allow the Kuru name to be dragged lower, even by those who deserve it. He sends Arjuna and Bhima to free Duryodhana, and so the cousins he wronged become the ones who save him. Imagine it. You come to mock your enemies, and they rescue you from your own stupidity. There are meals that go down badly. There are insults that sting. And then there is this. Duryodhana survives it, but the shame clings. Shakuni receives him afterward and does what he always does. He does not lead him toward humility. He does not say enough. He does not say, "You were spared. Be wiser now." No, he gathers the prince's humiliation, warms it in his hands, and hands it back as fuel. So the years keep marching. 12 in the forest, then the 13th in disguise. The Pandavas vanish into another kingdom under assumed names, living with restraint so sharp it almost glitters. Bhima cooks, Arjuna dances and teaches. Yudhishthira plays the courtier with a gambler's hand and a monk's face. Draupadi serves a queen while danger prowls every corridor. It is survival by silence, by timing, by not reaching too soon for what is yours. In Hastinapura, everyone counts. Days, months, rumors. Did they fail? Were they seen? Must they begin again? Shakuni likes this game too. Less elegant than dice, perhaps, but still a game. Delay, suspicion, technicality, hope stretched until it creaks. He knows that men can be tormented simply by making them wait at the threshold. But the year ends. The Pandavas emerge, alive, armed, allied, and the old question returns, no longer content to whisper, will the kingdom be given back? Now the halls of power begin to fill with embassies, arguments, appeals, old men with tired eyes, younger men with sharpened pride. The smell of sandalwood mixes with horse sweat and sealing wax. Messengers arrive powdered with road dust. Their lips are cracked. Their news is never simple. Peace is offered more than once. That is important to feel. It is not as if the world leapt gladly into war without anyone trying to hold the door shut. In one court, men still ask for fairness. In another, men still advise restraint. In private rooms, mothers pray. In public halls, flatterers ruin everything. Krishna comes, and when he enters Hastinapura, the air changes the way it changes before rain. Even people determined to behave badly sit a little straighter. He asks for what is just. Then, when justice seems too rich for proud men to swallow, he asks for less. He narrows the request until it would fit in an ordinary hand, a share, a settlement. At last, merely 5 villages, enough for 5 brothers to stand on without shame. It should have been easy. A city can spare 5 villages the way a rich man can spare 5 grains of rice. But pride is a famine that begins in a full granary. Duryodhana refuses. Karna stands with him. Dushasana grins. And Shakuni, old gambler, old uncle, old keeper of injuries, does not draw back. He has led them to this cliff and still prefers the view. You can smell the court that day. Heated silk, lamp smoke, old wood, men who have been sitting too long, with anger in their bodies. Outside, chariot wheels grind in courtyards, horses stamp. Somewhere in the women's chambers, someone has already begun to fast and pray. Gandhari speaks, Vidura speaks, Bhishma speaks, Drona speaks. Words, good words, grave words, necessary words. They fall like rain on baked clay. Shakuni has lived long enough among royal men to know that advice arrives beautifully dressed and often leaves barefoot and ignored. When Krishna leaves without peace, the road to Kurukshetra opens, not with thunder, with paperwork, supply lines, harness leather, and men trying not to meet their own thoughts. Armies gather, standards are dyed, arrow shafts are bundled, blacksmiths work before dawn. Ghee is poured into sacred fires, elephants are washed and painted. Mothers tie protective threads around wrists that will soon hold bows slick with sweat. Wives press sandal paste onto foreheads and then turn away quickly, because if they keep looking, they may never stop. You are standing near the edge of a mustering ground now. Dust lifts around your ankles. The smell is everywhere. Horses, sun-warmed leather, clarified butter, iron, dry grass crushed under thousands of feet. From one side comes the deep moan of conches being tested. From another, the ring of hammer on axle pin. And through all of it moves Shakuni. Older now, still keen-eyed, still composed. He has no kingdom's innocence left to lose. If he ever had any after Gandhara and the prison and the years of watching his sister disappear behind cloth and duty, it is long gone. He rides beside Duryodhana as counselor and kinsman, not at the center of the line like Bhishma or Drona or Karna, but near enough to keep feeding the fire. War at last, the great answer to every bad decision, a family reunion with every hand on a weapon. The first days pass in thunder. Bhishma leads, Drona leads after him, Karna waits, then burns. Vows are made and fulfilled. Sons fall before fathers. Teachers are brought down by students. The field changes under the feet of men and beasts until it no longer looks like a field at all, and Shakuni is there through it. He fights, yes, because at a certain point, even the man who arranged the storm has to stand in the rain. But he is still most himself in the spaces between charges, in the muttered counsel, in the little turns of pressure that keep Duryodhana from collapsing into despair. Yet despair comes anyway. How could it not? One by one, the great pillars go down. Bhishma on his bed of arrows, Drona with his mind broken before his body falls, Karna at last meeting Arjuna under a doomed sun. Each loss narrows the world around Duryodhana, and with each narrowing, Shakuni's cleverness starts to look smaller. There are games that work in halls. There are tricks that matter over polished boards. But once the earth is shaking under elephants and brothers are searching for brothers through clouds of dust, the old arts lose some of their shine. Still, he stays. Of course he stays. He has come too far through ruin to step aside and pretend surprise. By the 18th day, the war has become thin and brutal, like a fire consuming its last beams. The armies are no longer vast seas of men. They are remnants, clusters, torn standards, exhausted horses with foam at their mouths. The afternoon heat lies over everything like a hand. You taste dust constantly now. It grits between your teeth. The wind carries the smell of trampled earth, broken chariot wood, sweat gone sour under armor, and the faint sweetness of garlands that were fresh many mornings ago. This is where Sahadeva comes looking. Quiet Sahadeva, youngest Pandava, the one many overlook until it is too late, the one who remembers, the one whose mind is sharp as a newly honed blade beneath all that discipline. He has carried a vow of his own across all these years. Shakuni must fall by his hand. Not Bhima's rage, not Arjuna's fame, not some random arrow loosed in the press. His. So they meet at last in the war's final wreckage. No hall now, no polished dice, no cushions, no lamps reflecting on crystal floors. Only open sky and dust. The clever uncle, who once commanded rooms with a flick of the wrist, must stand under the hard sun with weapon in hand and no loaded cubes to help him. You can feel the stillness around the moment, even inside the battle's noise. A chariot wheel groans, a horse snorts foam. Far off, someone blows a conch that sounds tired even before the note is done. Heat shimmers above the ground. Sahadeva comes forward with the calm of a man arriving exactly where he always knew he would one day arrive. Shakuni does not flee. That matters. Whatever else he is, schemer, tempter, ruin maker, he does not run from the end. They clash in that late war light amid the collapsing remains of Duryodhana's hopes. Shakuni's son falls before him. The old Gandharan fights with the speed and craft left in him, but age is there and exhaustion and the long interest on every deed he has ever set in motion. Sahadeva presses him. Years are in those blows. The lakhhouse, the whispers, the poison, the dice. Draupadi dragged to the hall. The exile, the refusal of peace, all of it. The reckoning is not loud. It is precise. At last, Sahadeva brings him down there in the dust of Kurukshetra. And the uncle who had manipulated princes and courtiers, kings and fools, reaches the end not in shadow, but in daylight. Shakuni falls. And with him falls a certain kind of laughter, the dry, knowing kind that sits just behind disaster and calls itself cleverness. For a moment, the wind moves across the field and lifts the edge of a torn banner. That is all. No court remains to gasp, no dice remain to rattle, no servant rushes to pour wine, no nephew leans close for one more poisoned suggestion. Only the stillness that comes when a long debt is finally paid. You stand there with the dust on your skin and the sun lowering westward, and the whole long road behind him becomes visible at once. Gandhara's hard stones, his sister's wedding, the hunger in the dark, the palace corridors, the game, the exile, the refusals, the war. He wanted the house of Kuru to burn. It burned, and like so many men who call fire for warmth, he discovered too late that it does not ask whose room it is in. Evening begins to gather by the time the news reaches Duryodhana. Shakuni is gone. Another pillar, if a crooked one, broken at last. The prince who trusted him has almost nothing left now but stubbornness and doom. Around him, the Kaurava world has thinned to a handful of names and a mountain of memory. The uncle who fed his envy from boyhood, who taught him to prefer cunning over peace, who made injury feel noble and revenge feel intimate, has slipped from the world of the living into the vast silence where no one can coach you anymore. And the field keeps cooling. The worst of the heat leaves the ground. Crows wheel lower. The smell of evening comes at last. Dust settling, smoke from distant pyres, a breeze crossing dry grass. Somewhere far off, the river still moves as if kingdoms have never mattered much to water. That is how this stretch of Shakuni's path ends. Not at the throw, at the answer. Not in a jeweled hall, in plain earth, with Sahadeva standing over what remained, and the sky of Kurukshetra turning from gold to copper, then slowly toward the dark. And if you listen closely, past the crows and the wheels and the weary men calling to one another across the fading light, you can almost hear the old sound that started everything. A small hard rattle on wood. Then silence. The smell has changed now. No more hot dust from chariot wheels. No more lamp smoke trapped in palace rafters. What remains is quieter than that. River air, fading ash, sandalwood from old halls, the long cooling breath after ruin. So after all of that, what were the ancient storytellers trying to tell us? They were not preserving Shakuni simply as a crooked gambler with clever hands. That would be too small. They were preserving a warning about injury that is never healed, only polished, about grief that learns to smile, about the kind of intelligence that can read every weakness in a room except its own. Shakuni begins far from Hastinapura, in that hard northwestern land where wind moves over stone and men survive by sharp memory. Gandhara matters. It shapes him. In a place of narrow roads and uneasy treaties, you learn quickly that strength is not always in the arm. Sometimes it lives in the tongue, in patience, in the ability to wait while someone stronger makes a mistake. That kind of intelligence is real. It can save a kingdom, but it can also harden a heart. And that is one of the deepest truths resting inside his life. The very gifts that protect you can also become the tools that undo you. Shakuni's mind was quick. His reading of people was flawless. He could sense pride, hunger, vanity, shame, all the little cracks in human beings where influence slips in. There is power in that. There is brilliance in that. But in the Mahabharata, brilliance without dharma becomes dangerous. Dharma is not just rule following. It is not bland good behavior. It is the deeper alignment that keeps your gifts tied to what is right. It is the inner yoke that stops talent from running wild. Without that restraint, cleverness becomes manipulation. Loyalty becomes possession. Love becomes excuse. And that is where Shakuni cuts deepest, because he does not come wearing the face of an obvious monster. He comes as family, as an uncle, as a brother, as the man who remembers old humiliations, as the one who says he is only protecting his own. That is why his path feels so real. Adharma rarely announces itself with drums. It often enters the room dressed as devotion. It says it is doing this for the family, for justice, for a wound that was never acknowledged, for a sister, for a nephew, for love. You can feel how tempting that is. Gandhari's marriage sits right at the center of it. A sister sent into a palace of power, bound to a blind prince, veiling herself in chosen darkness. Whether Shakuni's bitterness began there or only deepened there, the wound is easy to understand. He sees his sister swallowed by compromise. He sees politeness covering pain. He sees a royal arrangement that may be lawful and still feel merciless. And once grievance settles into the bones, Maya begins its work. Maya is often called illusion, but not in the cheap sense of things being fake. It is the veil that makes one part of reality seem like the whole of reality. It is the force that narrows your sight. For Shakuni, grievance becomes that veil. The old hurt grows so large that everything else must serve it. Every new event feeds the old fire. Every slight confirms what he already believes. Every scheme starts to feel necessary. That is how grievance begins to masquerade as destiny. Not because fate truly leaves no choice, because pain, if worshipped long enough, starts to feel sacred. Then comes Duryodhana, and another lesson opens. Shakuni does not invent his nephew's envy from nothing. The seeds are already there. Duryodhana sees Bhima's strength, Arjuna's praise, Yudhishthira's calm authority, and he burns. Shakuni steps into that heat and gives it language, gives it strategy, gives it permission. That is the terror of bad guidance. A child may feel anger. A young prince may feel overshadowed. Those storms can still pass. But if an elder keeps feeding them, shaping them, sharpening them, then anger becomes identity. The listener has already walked those corridors and felt it happen, joke by joke, grievance by grievance, one poisonous comfort at a time. This is karma in slow motion, not thunder from a clear sky, not instant punishment. Karma in the Mahabharata ripens the way fruit ripens, slowly, quietly, in sunlight and shadow both. A word said in spite, a silence kept at the wrong time, a humiliation not repented, a game accepted when it should have been refused. Years pass, the consequences keep growing. By the time the dice strike the board, much has already been set in motion, and the dice game shows something painful and important. Catastrophe does not always arrive looking like war. Sometimes it arrives looking like entertainment, an invitation, a polished hall, silk rustling, courtiers seated properly, elders present, everything respectable, everything arranged, and still the kingdom is already tipping into darkness. That scene survives in memory because it shows how adharma can flourish in a room full of honorable men who do nothing. Shakuni throws the dice, yes. Duryodhana delights in the fall, yes. But the silence around them is part of the disaster. Dharma is not preserved by knowing the right thing privately. It has to be lived, spoken, defended. When it is not, the fire spreads. Then the war comes, as it must. By that time, no one wins cleanly. That is important too. Shakuni helps set the blaze, but the blaze does not stay obedient to its maker. It takes sons, brothers, teachers, friends. It claims those who were cruel and those who were noble. That is the terrible majesty of karma, once fully ripened. It does not politely strike only the original offender. It moves through families, through kingdoms, through generations, and in the end, Shakuni must stand in open dust, not in a gaming hall, no loaded throw, no polished wood, no laughter in his sleeve, just the field, just the reckoning, just the long shadow of everything he chose. That matters. The Mahabharata does not leave him floating above consequence. It brings him down to earth. It lets him meet the world he helped make. So what remains when you gather all of this together? Something very human and very tender. The ancient keepers of this tale wanted you to remember that hurt is real, but hurt is not a god. Family loyalty is sacred, but it is not sacred when it asks you to betray dharma. Intelligence is a gift, but not when it is used only to expose weakness and never to heal it. And revenge, however justified it first appears, does not stay neat. It grows legs, it enters houses, it teaches children, it eats the table it was served on. Shakuni is tragic because he is not empty. He loves, he remembers, he is loyal, he is wounded, but he gives those wounded parts the throne inside himself. And once that happens, the rest follows. So you can close this part of the epic gently now and rest in its shape. Dharma is subtle, yes, but not invisible. Karma is slow, but sure. Maya is powerful, but it breaks when the heart becomes honest. And the safest wisdom is never mere cleverness. It is clarity joined to restraint. love joined to truth, power joined to self-command. That is the peace at the center of all this sorrow. Not that pain never comes, but that pain does not have to become inheritance. And that may be the most comforting truth in all of this. The story does not ask you to deny injury. It doesn't ask you to pretend humiliation is small or that betrayal leaves no mark. It simply asks, what happens next? What do you feed inside yourself after the wound? What do you make of it? Do you turn it into wisdom or into a private altar where resentment burns day and night? Shakuni chose one path. Others in the epic choose differently. That contrast matters. Yudhishthira suffers shame and still keeps reaching toward Dharma, even imperfectly. Draupadi suffers public outrage and still does not become small. Vidura stands in a poisoned room and continues to speak what is right. Krishna enters a court, drunk on pride, and still offers peace again and again, even when no one there has earned that generosity. The story places all these responses side by side, so you can feel the difference between pain that deepens wisdom and pain that recruits the soul into war. And once you feel that difference, the whole epic becomes clearer. Dharma is rarely the easy road. Usually, it is the road that leaves your ego unsatisfied. It is the road where you do not get to answer every insult, where you do not get to turn every wound into a weapon, where you are asked to carry strength without cruelty, memory without venom, and love without possession. That is difficult, very difficult. The story never pretends otherwise. So when the mind grows quiet after all this noise, maybe the gentlest lesson is also the deepest one. Guard what you rehearse in the heart. Guard the injuries you return to again and again. Guard the stories you tell yourself about what is owed to you, because those inward repetitions become character, and character becomes fate. And when you feel the story settling, it settles like evening over stone courtyards after heat. The noise goes first, then the anger, then the old rattling need to win. At last, there is only stillness, only breath, only the sense that somewhere beyond dice, beyond vows, beyond wounded pride, Dharma remains, quiet as a lamp in a dark hall, waiting to be chosen. And when the shouting is finished and the dust begins to settle, one sound remains, the faint little rattle that started it all. Not the conches, not the wheels, not the crash of mace on armor, just that smaller sound, bone or ivory against wood, a gambler's music, dry, neat, almost polite. The field of Kurukshetra lies under evening air now. Crows hop among broken standards. Wind moves the torn edges of banners that yesterday snapped like proud tongues. The horses are gone quiet. Even grief has grown tired. It sits low and heavy like smoke after rain. You stand there in the cooling dark, and it feels impossible that so much ruin once fit inside one man's clever fingers. Shakuni is gone. Sahadeva saw to that in the dust and fury of the last reckonings, when promises made years before finally found their road. No carved seat in a shining hall for him then. No soft carpets, no polished board. Only earth, hot underfoot, and the blunt honesty of war. And then the end came, quickly compared to the years he spent setting it in motion. That is often how these things go. A lifetime to weave the knot. One hard pull to tighten it. Far away in Hastinapura, the palace begins its nightly dimming. One lamp goes out near the women's chambers, another in the outer court, another beside a pillar, painted with curling vines and faded gold. Servants move like shadows, with small clay cups in their hands, pinching wicks, lowering flames, closing shutters against the night wind. The great hall is empty now. No kings leaning forward, no old men staring at the floor, no prince slapping his thigh in cruel delight, no uncle smiling as if this were all only sport. The polished floor still remembers sandals, though. Marble remembers everything. If you stood there barefoot, you would feel the coolness rise through your soles. You would smell old incense in the beams overhead, ghee long burned away, a trace of lotus oil, a trace of dust. And in that hush, you might imagine the dice again, that soft little clatter, that terrible little invitation. Come, sit, play. It is strange what remains after a man is gone. Not always his face, not always his victories. Sometimes only the habits he taught other hearts. Duryodhana carried him longest. Even before the war, even before the fall, you could feel it in the prince's silences, in the way he watched his cousins laugh, in the way every kindness looked to him like insult wearing perfume, in the way he mistook injury for identity until he no longer knew where one ended and the other began. An uncle had fed that fire for years, carefully, lovingly even. That is the part that chills the air. Not hatred shouted from a rooftop, affection whispered in a private room, a hand on the shoulder, a murmur after humiliation, a game offered at the exact moment pride is most hungry. Shakuni did not need to push very hard by the end. The road had been walked too many times. Duryodhana knew it by heart. And Gandhari. Gandhari. Her blindfold outlived them both. The cloth changed over the years, of course. Fresh linen, softer weave, new knots tied by practiced fingers. But the darkness remained the same. You can almost hear it when the palace sleeps. The whisper of fabric drawn across the eyes, the faint brush against hair silvering with age. Sister of Gandhara, queen of the Kurus, mother of sons who fell one by one into the furnace. And somewhere under all those titles, still the girl who once traveled east with her brother beside her, hearing strange birds in strange gardens, smelling a river city before she saw it, not knowing how costly that journey would become. Did she think of him at the end? Of course she did. Not only the schemer in silk, also the brother from the dry country, the one who knew the mountain wind, the one who walked beside camels and cedar carts, the one who belonged to the same childhood. Love does not vanish just because ruin follows it. That would make life much simpler. Life is rarely so helpful. Midnight deepens over the old capital. Somewhere, a guard taps his spear butt against stone to keep himself awake. Somewhere in the kitchens, banked coals give off the last warmth of the day, and the smell of ash mingles with rice water and copper. A dog turns twice in the courtyard and sleeps. You move through the memory of the palace as if through a dream. Here, the corridor where Shakuni waited after the game, listening for news with half a smile. Here, the balcony where Duryodhana stood rigid with resentment, staring toward Indraprastha, as if envy alone could bridge the distance. Here, the chamber where Gandhari sat in chosen darkness, hands folded in her lap, hearing more than anyone ever told her. Here, the hall itself, always the hall. A kingdom can survive many things: bad harvests, weak kings, even a few fools, inexpensive jewelry. But once a hall meant for justice becomes a place where shame is entertained, something sacred slips out through the door and does not easily return. Shakuni knew halls. He knew where people sat when they felt powerful. He knew when silence would help him more than speech. He knew that men ruin themselves fastest when they believe they are only enjoying a game. By morning, the field will look different again. Mist will gather low over wheel ruts. Dew will settle on abandoned arrows. Priests will come. Women will come. Brothers will search among the fallen. The living will begin the long work of naming loss. Shakuni will be named among them, not first, but not forgotten, never forgotten. In later years, when children in courtyards hear the old names, his will still make elders exhale through the nose and shake their heads, not loudly, just once. The way people do when they remember smoke in the lungs. Some will remember him as laughing, some as limping, some as always holding dice, some as the foreign uncle with sharp eyes and soft hands, some as the man who helped bring down a house already leaning toward disaster, some as a brother who never stopped carrying an old wound. Stories keep all of it. They do not clean him up. They do not let him disappear. So night goes on. The moon climbs over parapets and old battle roads. Silver light gathers on empty thresholds. The jackals call far from the city walls. In the northwestern dark, beyond rivers and plains, beyond caravan tracks and thorn scrub, the winds of Gandhara still move over stone. Cold, thin, remembering, and if you listen long enough, with the patience night teaches, you can almost hear two sounds braided together across the years. The rustle of a blindfold being tied, the faint rattle of dice in a waiting hand. Then even that grows softer. The palace sleeps. The battlefield cools. The names drift out over the earth like smoke from extinguished lamps. And somewhere in the vast old darkness of India, where stories settle into the grain of wood and the hush between temple bells, an uncle's laugh fades at last into silence. Only the night remains, only the wind over stone, only the long, quiet memory of what was set in motion and how far it traveled before the world grew still.